Morning, Chris. How are you?
Morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Good. Everything's good with that?
I think we're good. Obviously, I'm just, I know I can mute the boardroom, which I did, but then to unmute, I just go to that place and I mute at the kiosk over there.
Okay.
That seems to be the best way it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi. So
We got about 10 or 12 meetings, we'll figure this out, right? We'll figure it out.
yeah, we good now.
All right, all good. Well, we can't even get enough board members here right now, so we'll see. You know, the one on the left.
So are we required to keep our mask on even when we're talking at the podium? I know Jennifer was on the call.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard PSK say, it's interesting, I've watched the PSK meeting, it seems like Brad leaves his on. I would think you could take it off, you know? Hey. Oh.
Maybe with your CPD exam, they can do it. No. I mean, like.
Want me to reboot it?
Yeah, it's still not detecting it.
So should, because I guess the microphone's on here, we mute
Yes.
this, just probably keep this muted over here.
Hello? Yeah, David? No, I was just logging on. I can't hear anything. Hey, I got Ronnie getting you those numbers. Yeah, it was a little late. I called her and she didn't see the email before she left yesterday, so she's getting those together. Yep. Bye.
Can you hear us?
You just hit it one time, that's it.
Hey, Richard, Chris Jaddick with TBARTA. Can you hear us? We're leaving the meeting on mute until we begin.
Right, so I'm running the legislative. So, good morning, calling the legislative meeting to order. At this time, I would like to see if we have any public comment. Wait, what am I on? I'm sorry. Am I doing this right? Do we, let's see, is there anyone who wants to say anything during public comment?
There's no problem.
All right, we have consent agenda items, which are the April meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do we have a quorum to make votes?
We do not.
Okay, so we won't be making any motion. Information items, we're gonna have a legislative update from Ron Pierce this morning.
Oh. I interrupt really quickly. We do have a quorum. We do have 4. So we have a total of 6 with the most recent update.
Okay, then we'll call for the vote on the motion to accept the consent agenda items. All in favor? Aye. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I can be pretty quick. I know we're tight on time now. Just a couple of updates for you. Session ended on April 30th. They were actually in Tallahassee this week for a special session on gaming, which I will not touch on this morning. 2 updates for you is number 1, the $1.5 million was included as a part of the final budget that has not been released to the governor yet. So let me just preface by saying, was a part of the final budget passed by the legislature. The legislature has not given the budget at this point to the governor's office, which we expect to happen sooner rather than later, by the way. There's a lot of things in back of the bill spending for this fiscal year that I know they want to try to get done. We talked to the governor's office last week about our preparation. They're obviously well-versed on TBARTA. Didn't have any specific questions. We've had a couple of key legislators also reach out to the governor's office. We've also had a couple of our board members reach out to some members who also reach out to the governor's office as well. So the 1.5 million that was included, it is DOT dollars, it is trust fund dollars, and it is non-recurring. That's not necessarily perfect for us, but it's obviously something we want funding, and that's what the legislature directed to do. We probably want to meet. I know Secretary Gwynn's on here and Ming's on here as well. We probably want to have a meeting with them and also probably DOT in Tallahassee as well to talk about if there's a way to limit the impact the 1.5 million could have on some of our other transit partners in the region. So I think that's a conversation that we can have offline at a later date. Again, the governor does not have the budget. He has not gone through vetoes yet. I would not expect as many vetoes as last year, but we're hopeful that he will approve. We've got some key legislators that are definitely supporting the $1.5 million in the budget. Let me also share with you, we had a bill this year that was going to make some minor changes to our Enabling Act. That was included as a part of the DOT package, Senate Bill 1194. Senator Hooper and President Simpson and Representative Blazongolia were very instrumental in making sure that was included in the final couple weeks of session. Again, that bill has not been released to the governor yet, has not been signed into law. We're hopeful that he will sign the DOT package. It goes into effect on July 1st of this year. And probably the biggest thing that it does, it did a few things, as you all know, since you approved our agenda. But the biggest thing I think it's going to do to help from a quorum standpoint is it will allow the mayor of St. Pete and the mayor of Tampa to be able to appoint a designee within their city council to attend board meetings on their behalf and vote. So that will go effect in July, and hopefully that again will help from a quorum standpoint. So, Madam Chair, I'll stop there and see if you or any members of the committee have any questions or comments.
Are there any comments for Mr. Pierce?
Great job, Ron.
Thank you.
Yeah, from where we started to where we ended up, very happy. All right, thank you so much. Now we'll get a federal legislative update from Harry Glenn, Steve Palmer from Van Scoik, and we'll see you in a little bit, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Harry Glenn. My colleague Steve Palmer's here with us too. We'll also, like Ron, be brief because we know you're pressed for time. Unlike Ron, the state has finished up. I think the federal government's just starting to get going here on issues related to infrastructure. Just a couple issues. We expect the president to finally release his fiscal year 22 budget request a week from today, May 28th, and that'll officially kick off the budget, the appropriation season for the Congress. We'll continue to monitor that and let you know the numbers. Just in general, the president's proposing a 15% increase in discretionary spending, which should be good news for transportation and transit programs, but we'll get more details next week. Other issues, it's, as I'm sure you all have been following, it has been Infrastructure Month in Washington. The House, the Senate, and the president continue to try and negotiate the bounds of an infrastructure package, what will and will not be included in that, how they'll pay for it. Those issues are still very much in flux. We understand that the Senate Republicans are going to submit another proposal to the president today, to the White House today. They started at about a $568 billion infrastructure package, and last report was up to about $800 billion. But I think there's still a far distance apart between the White House and the Senate Republicans. So they'll continue to negotiate on that. The Senate, and Steve's going to talk a little bit about this in a second, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee is talking about marking up the highway portion of that bill next week. The House Chairman DeFazio had planned to mark up his version of the bill this month, but he ended up announcing this week he's postponing that until June. The House has actually left town yesterday and is not coming back until June 14th, so they're off for 3 weeks. And the Senate will take a week off over those next 3 weeks, so they won't be here the entire time either. So hopefully between now and June 14th, there'll be some negotiations reach fruition, and they'll get agreement on the size and scope of and how to pay for an infrastructure package. But with that, I'm going to pass over to Steve, and he can talk about the particulars of the infrastructure package related to transportation and some news related to nominations. Steve?
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Harry kind of gave you the schedule in terms of where they are in marking up the surface transportation bill in the House. The problem the House is having, as well as the Senate, is the surface transportation reauthorization bill fits into the context of Biden's jobs plan, but the committees aren't even sure how it fits in. They're trying to figure out, is it on top of, is the Biden plan on top of the surface transportation bill? Is there going to be more money for transit than in the surface transportation bill? They still do not know. And I was talking to Chairman Peter DeFazio's staff yesterday, and they're still trying to figure that out. So there's a real conundrum going on there. The Senate Environment and Public Works, as Harry said, may mark up the highway title. They've got split jurisdiction in the Senate. And the Senate Banking Committee, which handles transit, has been silent still about what they're planning on doing and when they're planning on doing it. So we really don't know the priorities of where the Senate is, with one exception. Last week, Senator Sherrod Brown, who's the chair of the committee, Senate Banking Committee, as well as Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, introduced a bill that would authorize $73 billion for zero-emission buses. And that would be good news for TBARTA, because it would allow them to immediately enter into zero-emission procurement with zero-emission buses, knowing the federal share was going to be there. It would be a significant increase, and I think we can count on this being in the Senate version of the bill, but it would provide significant resources for bus acquisition, and that would ultimately help TBARTA with its plans. But the only other thing I wanted to add quickly was that the Senate Banking Committee earlier this week approved Nuria Fernandez's nomination to be Federal Transit Administrator. It was unanimous, which is unheard of in this environment. And that nomination now goes to the full Senate. There is no schedule for that to happen yet, but it's likely to happen fairly quickly. So with that, we're happy to turn it back to you for answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for our legislative folks?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interesting to follow. Do we have any other business for the legislative committee? Okay, I think we'll just go ahead and adjourn this one and roll into our next one so we can, well, we have 5 minutes, I guess. Okay. I guess I have a little bit of a question. I did read somewhere, maybe it was in one of my NACO updates, about a program that they were trying to find a home for called Highways to Neighborhoods. I think that's what it's called. Is that still in discussion, and my understanding was that it had to do with highways that had come into neighborhoods and split them, and that they were gonna be maybe required to take the highways down.
You're correct. No, you're absolutely correct. That bill has been introduced, and I know there's interest in trying to get that included in the next surface transportation bill. It's not clear, though, if there's enough support to get it into the bill. But you know, there's always going to be opposition from the state DOTs to do that, to take that kind of action, because they'd rather see that money, their scarce money, go for highways. But that is something that's on the table and it is being actively discussed.
So I wondered if we had any highways that, if that was enacted, do we have any highways that would be affected? And I'm thinking about St. Pete.
Hey, Steve, the President Biden has talked about this issue. He uses examples in New Orleans, when interstate highway has gone through the center of the city and kind of split the city in half, and it's kind of created on a lack of connectivity between both sides of the highway. And he talks about some of those issues. I don't know in the Tampa Bay area. I mean, I know St. Petersburg's talked about on either side of the baseball stadium, I-70, 175 and 375, how those ramps have come down, and they feel like they've split the community. And at one point they were talking about bringing 175 down to at level by the stadium. So, I mean, that would be certainly a project that might, if this ever became law, might be something worth considering. I think of the area around Ybor City, where I-4 goes through Tampa. I think of the curve there where I-275 goes north at Seminole Heights. I mean, some of those areas, even the West Shore area, I mean, kind of cuts the city in half. I don't know that the bill, Steve, requires that they take down the interstates. I think it's about trying to figure out ways to connect both sides of those interstates, I think. So I think it would probably be a discretionary program that would be a grant application, much like the Build Grant, Tiger Grant program, something like that, I guess. But we still have a long way to go on that one.
You know, just for my fellow board members, I'm a very big trails person. I represented 3 governors on the State Greenways and Trails Council. And when something that we really have to be mindful when they build turnpikes or highways through communities, they need to be cognizant of alternative transportation methods that need to get through and under the highways or across. And when DOT was doing the remodel at State Road 52 and 75, I was a brand new commissioner, but I saw that in the new design, they had taken out the former train underpass, the train tunnel. And I knew I put a trail on the map that followed the old abandoned railroad line that the Pinellas Trail's on, which is the Orange Belt Railroad. And so we call it the Orange Belt Trail, and it's a very important trail in my county. And there would not have been a way to get from the west side of 75 to the east side of 75 safely, because you don't want to have cyclists and pedestrians go under the 52-75, intersection. So DOT paused, went back and redrew at a cost of $1 million, redrew the intersection and put the tunnel. They moved it a little bit, but they put a tunnel back in. And what's now, it actually has given us another road as well, so traffic can bypass that intersection. But we have a real problem with the Suncoast on 54. We have no way for cyclists to get from the east side to the west side. We've had quite a few fatalities at that intersection for people trying to get to the Suncoast Trail. So something we have to think about, make sure that they think about when we're designing these things is the pedestrian and the cyclist and whatever else is coming, hoverboards, segways. Okay, well, I think we'll adjourn for a minute and nope, rolling on into the next one, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Finance.
Who's chairing finance?
And I've got it right here. First, I want to thank Commissioner Starkey for putting this back on time. Very nice. We're actually right on time. And I'll go ahead and call to order the May Finance Committee meeting for Friday, May 21st. I am sitting in for Commissioner Long, who has other county duties that preclude her from being with us today. So we'll go right ahead, and I'll ask Chris if we have any public comments. Okay, thank you, Chris. Very first order of business, a consent agenda item. That's the April Finance Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. Thank you. We'll go right into an information item. Is Melanie Williams with us? Good morning, Melanie. I see you on the screen now.
Good morning. So yes, I'll go ahead and present the April 2021 report for financial. So the year to date through the month of April, we had a net surplus of $349,000. Now this surplus was $23,000 under the budget amount of $373,000. So looking here at the revenues, we were $1.8 million under budget, and this was primarily due to the timing of the PD&E and technology study. In correlation to that, we were also $1.8 million under budget for the expenses. Looking here at the balance sheet, our accounts receivable balance at the end of April was $594,000, and our accounts payable balance was $382,000. And at the end of April, our cash balance was $542,000. So that pretty much wraps up the summary for April.
Okay, Melanie, thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Okay, yeah, we're in very good shape, very positive. We'll move on to a discussion and action item, and this is, I believe this will be another good news story right here. Is the fiscal 2020 audit results. Are they here to give us those results? And is Lance here?
Yes, I am here.
Good morning, and we'll turn it over to you to give us a summary of the results, please.
Sounds great. And I will go ahead and share my screen right now as well. And if I could just get confirmation that you guys can see my screen.
We can see it.
All right, perfect. Great news. Thank you. Just for the record, my name is Lance Schmidt, and I served as your engagement principal for your audit. I'm a principal with the firm of CLA, and we performed your audit for the year ended September 30, 2020. So I want to present those results to you today. You should have received a draft of the financial statements, and for this short presentation, what I plan on doing is just recapping kind of the results of our audit, some of the procedures that we performed, and then answer any questions that you all may have related to the audit. Just keep in mind as we go through this presentation to consider both our governance letter and the financial statements in whole. A lot of what I'll be talking about is just kind of summary information derived from those documents. So I think it helps to start off by just recapping exactly what we've been asked to do as your auditors, because we think of an audit as just one simple thing, but there's a few different deliverables that we do provide. The first thing that we do is audit your financial statements. That's what you typically think of an auditor doing, is looking at your internal controls, looking at your financial statements, footnotes, and making sure those are correctly stated. The second thing that we do is we actually issue a state single audit. Some years we do a federal and a state single audit. Those are two different sets of guidance that we have to follow, and we have to audit both federal and state if they exceed a certain threshold. This year we only had to look at one state program, and now it's a local transportation project. There's really 3 different grants that fall underneath that. Those grants are really to do 3 things: find innovative transit solutions, develop some infrastructure around multimodal transportation, and then the last is working on developing future projects and providing that support to do that. And again, when we talk about this, we're looking at more than just financial activity. We're looking at other reports that go to the state agencies. We're looking at compliance matters, et cetera. We also issue an examination procedure. This is basically where we're testing to make sure that you're complying with the Florida statutes of the investment in public funds. And then lastly, we also do an agreed upon procedure related to National Transit Database Report that goes to the Federal Transit Administration. So this is looking at a variety of different metrics and reports and data that you provide to them to make sure that the information you're providing to them is accurate. And so to really jump to the conclusion of what were the results of our audit. The first report we issue is that opinion on the financial statements. I'm glad to report that you received an unmodified opinion. That's the best audit report that you can receive. What that means is when we say unmodified opinion, that means we were able to say everything was materially correct, and we didn't have to say except for. If we had any exceptions to that standard audit opinion, you would either have a qualified audit report, adverse, or disclaimer. I'm glad to report that we did not have that situation. So again, great news there. The second report that we issue is our independent auditor's report on internal control over preparing those financial statements. So saying, do we have controls in place to accurately capture financial information? And then also looking at some other compliance matters as well. We don't necessarily issue an opinion on this, but if we had any findings related to the internal control, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, we'd be required to report those. I'm glad to say that we had none. So again, very good news there. And then lastly, I mentioned earlier, we do a state single audit where we're actually looking at compliance. We do issue an opinion on whether or not you materially complied with all the various requirements of the state single audit, specifically the FTA program that we looked at. And I'm glad to report that you received an unmodified opinion, which means you materially complied with all the compliance requirements of that particular grant that we looked at. So again, all very, very good news there. Last year, we actually had 4 findings on your financial statements. There were budgetary control, journal entries, preparation of bank statements and the timeliness of that. And I'm glad to report that all 4 of those findings were resolved this year. So we revisited those findings to make sure those concerns were addressed, and they were. So those are not repeat findings this year. So I wanted to, just follow up on last year's audit as well, to say we did see some very positive improvement regarding those matters. It's also important to note too that just because this is a clean audit report and there's no findings, I can't stress enough that this is something that's earned, not just given out. And so again, congratulations to management on a clean audit report going from 4 findings to 0 this year. So very good news. And obviously throughout the course, even though we don't have any written comments or findings, we do work closely with management and Melody and the staff to say, hey, if we see any opportunities for improvement, we want to share those as well. We don't always put those in writing just because they're not of significance to governance. Usually they're more matters of administration and practice. But again, we do want to make sure we're adding that value as well. I want to recap just some of the required governance communications that we are required to have with the board, and this should be in the letter that you received. But again, I just want to cover the highlights of this rather than going into the details of each one of those. But if we had any difficulties encountered during the audit, performing the audit, I'd be required to report those to you. I'm glad that we had none. If we had any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, this would be audit adjustments or things that we found that were incorrect, we'd be required to report those. And I'm glad to report that we had none as well. So again, very good news there. And the reason that's important is it means the financial information you've been looking at throughout the year has been correct. And if we saw huge swings from what you looked at last to what you see in the audit, that would be of concern because it would mean you were making decisions based on financial information that maybe wasn't as accurate as it could be. If we had any disagreements with management regarding compliance or financial matters, I'd be required to report those. I'm glad that we report we had none. We do ask your key members of management, including Melanie and David, to sign a management representation letter. That management representation letter basically states that the financial statements are true and correct to the best of their knowledge. So we will receive that upon approval from the board of the acceptance of the financial statements. If we had any consultations or if management had any other consultations with other CPA firms regarding any matters, that CPA firm is required to get with us before they issue an opinion. This is kind of like a second opinion in the medical profession. We were not aware of any of those. And then, as it relates to some of the significant aspects of the accounting practices, if there's anything major, we'd be required to report that. Really, the biggest thing is really the pension footnote that you have, that we did see a big increase in that pension liability outside the control of management. These were changes due to FRS assumptions that were made that caused that increase. Just want to spend just another second here, just kind of recapping, what our audit process looks like. Again, we start off by looking at entity level controls, looking at the various significant areas of your financial statements. I've got some of those listed out there: cash, revenues, receivables, payroll, expenditures, and obviously the financial reporting and close. And then we really look at those areas by conducting interviews and walkthroughs, doing a risk assessment based on our understanding of those areas. We do perform data analysis. This year, you did have a significant increase in expenses over last year. And so what we did was we did kind of a deeper dive. And I should say, every time that you have an auditor come back for a second year, we are required to kind of mix up our approach a little bit. We don't want Millie knowing exactly what we're going to do every time we come out, so we want to make sure we're keeping her on her toes. And so this year we did take a deeper dive on those, since we had a significant increase in vendor payments, and performed a variety of analysis, looking for any anomalies, checking out new vendors to make sure there was a good business reason for those vendors to exist. Significant increases, we wanted to understand why that was. Biggest increases really came from some benefits that were being provided through PSTA, as well as other consulting expenses, just again, due to increases in grant revenue as well. You had more to spend on those, so more was spent in those areas. And again, we do look at a lot of substantive procedures, which really is looking at invoices, looking at what we think of the hard documentation. You know, show me the documents that support the transactions that we see, and then ultimately that results in our reporting and conclusion. So, any questions on the results of our audit so far?
Any questions for them? None so far, Lance. Thank
Okay,
you.
sounds good. I just have just 2 slides left, and this is a little bit more, again, just want to provide a quick financial highlight for the board, and then just another quick slide on some future accounting standards that will affect TBARTA. As we take a look at the statement of net position, this is really as a single point in time. This is as of year end. How, you know, I always get the question, are we healthy? Are we financially, are we in good shape? It's important to keep in mind that the majority of TBARTA's activities are funded by grants. And so when we take a look at that, there's not going to be necessarily a reserve or a surplus that you would typically see in a city or a county. It's really money coming in for a designated purpose, spend the money on that designated purpose, really nothing left at the end of the day, which is pretty consistent with what we see when you take a look at your statement of net position. Net positions, again, 13,000, it's, you know, been a little bit negative in the past, again, due more so to timing differences than anything else. It's right near zero, which is where we'd expect it to be. The Frs Pension Liability did go up a lot this year, again, not due to decisions made by management, but really decisions and assumptions made by the actuaries of the Florida retirement system. The nice thing is, TBARTA is not on the hook to, that's not a true liability in the sense that if you had $730,000 today, you could pay down that liability. Your only responsibility is to make the annual contributions to FRS, and the liability is really theirs. However, for financial reporting purposes, you are required to take your share of that FRS liability and report it on your financial statement. So again, if you see that, I don't want anyone to think that, hey, look, why are our liabilities going up? How are we going to pay these in the future? It's more of I've heard people call it a paper liability, because again, all you're required to do is basically pay our FRS, and they take it from there. So otherwise, when we look at cash and current liabilities, you can see cash is 2.2 million, current liabilities is just over 2 million. Again, that's what we would expect to see. So again, everything is kind of lining up exactly the way we would expect it to look. And again, very consistent with what we'd expect to see of a special district largely funded by grants. So taking a look forward, there are some new accounting standards that will affect TBARTA in some way. There's still yet to determine the total impact of this, but any type of lease or service contract that has any elements of capital items. We love to talk about the coffee example. If you have a coffee service and you get a free coffee machine with that service, that's a capital item. But what we'll be doing in future audits is really taking a deeper dive in any type of recurring service contracts, either in the IT space or other areas, just to make sure there's no embedded leases there that we would need to report on. So again, something that we'll be talking a lot more about in the future as we move forward. And with that, I do just want to say thank you to Melanie, David, and the entire team for their assistance. We're not government regulators. We have a collaborative working relationship with our staff. We can't do everything on our own. We have to have assistance and input and cooperation from management. So again, I just want to say thank you to management for their assistance. Again, we had a great working relationship this year, and congratulations on a clean audit this year. So with that, if there's any questions regarding our audit, I'd be glad to take that at this time.
Committee members, any questions? No questions. Well, Lance, I want to thank you for a good thorough audit. I do appreciate you shifting things up to keep Melanie on her toes. To Melanie and David, great job. I was here last year for the audit last year. You know, Lance pointed out we had 4 little areas. Glad to see those are cleaned up and we're running really nice. So Lance, again, thank you. Melanie, great job. Thank you very much for both doing that and the briefing prior. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Chair McLean, if
Yes.
I may just weigh in on something.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to also say thank you so much to Melanie. It really does take a village to get a clean audit statement, and she's been the mayor of the village to make sure that we're compliant with everything. I also want to say thank you to CLA. They spent some time with us last summer. That was extremely helpful in getting this year's audit done very smoothly, so I appreciate that as well. And as you took a look at that, I think it was the second last slide that Lance had, you can see how well our assets have grown over time. And as Commissioner Long likes to say, we've got money in the bank. So we've come a long way over the last few years. And I appreciate everything that CLA has done, FDOT, our funding partners, as well as Melanie and staff. So just felt I needed to say that because they've made my life very easy.
Yeah. Well,
So thank
Debbie,
you.
there's also a debt of gratitude towards you also for helping us get this thing rolling and started and everything, and helping Melanie as she transitioned in. So for the whole entire group, to include CLA, I appreciate all the good efforts and all, and of course you see the results of those good efforts. They're paying off real well. And as you said, Debbie, we have money in the bank and we're surviving. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
comments? Okay. All right. Thank you. Great briefing. We'll move on to the next other business. Any other business? Doesn't appear to be.
Move to approve the audit.
Second.
Recommend the audit.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you for pointing that out. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion approves. Thank you again very much. Okay, and future meeting, it looks like for future meeting subjects, we have a 2022 budget and then the BMO annual performance review, and of course, there'll be for future meetings coming up. Unless there's anything else we're missing, we'll go ahead and adjourn the financial committee meeting. Thank you.
Well done.
I know we're out of the legislature, but something that just came to my mind is in the past we talked about inviting legislators to come to our meeting.
And I wonder when we have our regular meeting, I might bring that up under my legislative report.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. I didn't know. I was ter- Okay, great. I'll mute myself. Bye.
Please do. Okay, welcome to the May Policy Committee meeting for Friday, May 21st. We'll go ahead and call to order the meeting. And I'll ask Chris if we have any public comment.
We do not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. And do we have a quorum? We do. Thank you very much. So we can go right to the consent agenda, which is the April Policy Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. Thank you. We have a few things to cover, mainly briefings today, but we'll go right into the very first one, which is information item, which is the TD Tampa Bay mid-year report. And I'm going to turn this over to Chris to introduce our guest speaker. Okay, Chris.
Thank you very much. As you know, TD Tampa Bay is the ride service that TBARTA began last December for transportation disadvantaged individuals, providing regional county-to-county service for individuals who need it due to age, income, or disability. There's been no broad advertising campaign funding for this, but the word has spread and the use of the service has been growing, and we're very proud of that. We started off with only 70 rides in December, and we topped more than 700 in April. So the word is spread because the transit agencies have done a great job of spreading that word for us, but we've also gotten a little bit of media for that. And prior to tossing it over to Martin Catala of Cutter, who's going to give you an assessment and a report of how the service has been going, I wanted to show you one of those stories. This came from Chuck Henson of Bay News 9, who did a report on Bay News 9 about a month ago. And it profiles one of the users of our service, and I thought that would be interesting for the board to see that. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to play that video. Hopefully that'll come up. Here we go.
Getting there tonight, crossing county lines. Each county in Tampa Bay has its own public transit agency. It's only been in the past few years where the idea of crossing those boundary lines has been discussed between those agencies. Tonight, our real-time traffic expert Chuck Henson shows us a new service helping the disadvantaged of our community to get from county to county even easier.
Rodney Holmes has been in his chair for 11 years.
It just gives me the freedom that I've always wanted. I'm 67 years old, but I feel like I'm 40.
And that 40-year-old inside wants to get out and see all of Tampa Bay. But until recently, there was no way he could get from Pinellas County to any other county using transit with his chair. It's too wide for standard transit, and the specialized vans don't cross those county lines.
We saw that there was a need for people to get from county to county. That's what TBARTA is all about, connecting us regionally. So this service is for those who are transportation disadvantaged due to age, income, or disability.
That's when TD Tampa Bay was started.
This service is new. It's only 4 months old. But for people that live in residential facilities like this one, the growth of this service is essential to getting them around to all parts of Tampa Bay.
It runs point to point. You're not on a bus running a standard bus route. Sounds great, right? Okay, so to get things started, you need to qualify as a client.
Once you qualify as TD Disadvantage, you can qualify for local trips, such as in Pinellas County with PSTA, and you also qualify with TD Tampa Bay for those cross-county trips.
And the fee? Only $6 each way.
And my companion, aid, whatever you want to call it, rides for free.
The vehicle sent to pick up TD Tampa Bay clients varies depending on their disability.
TD Tampa Bay launched in December of last year with 70 people that first month. This month, more than 700 have registered.
In Seminole, Chuck Henson, Spectrum, Bay News 9.
If you'd like more information on TD Tampa Bay, Chuck has posted the link for registration with this story on baynews9.com.
I will tell you, I've spoken to a number of individuals who call asking for information about the service. And what's heartening is we speak to a lot of people like Rodney who say this service has really empowered them to get from county to county. We're not replacing any services out there. We work with the local CTC. So as mentioned, PSTA is the CTC provider here for the in-county transportation in Pasco. Every other county has its own CTCs. So we complement what they do, and we provide service they don't do by getting people across county lines or adding some weekend and evening service. We, of course, contract with, or I should say, we partner with USERV, which coordinates the call center and the drivers. The drivers are trained, as you know. And we have an application for this service to be extended beyond June 30th. To get an accurate assessment as to how the service has been going, we have contracted with Cutter, Martin Catala. I'm going to refer to him right now and allow him to share his screen because we've asked Cutter to do an independent analysis of this and provide a report to you now. So Martin, if you're there, please share your screen. I'll let you proceed.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. There's my screen share button. Thank you. All right. Everything seem okay for you on that end?
Yeah, we can see. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity for being here and the partnership with TBARTA. As Chris alluded, my name is Martin Catala, and I work at the USF's Center for Urban Transportation Research. And today I just wanted to go over kind of a brief performance summary. This was performance measures that the folks at TBARTA and at Cutter agreed and also in coordination with the folks at the Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged, which is the agency supporting also this program. So one of the components, or the most fundamental components of our effort, is to evaluate the service. And we kind of broke the evaluation into three categories. One which categorizes transportation performance measures, service demand, which again also kind of articulates or illustrates the extent of the demand for the service. And then also at the heart of it is to assess the customer satisfaction. So that was conducted through a survey. I'm going to go through each of those sets of measures, and then we're going to touch on a few of the highlighted performance evaluation measures to talk about today. So the transit performance measures, nothing, unusual here. We want to record the number of trips. We want to record the number of unduplicated riders, so the number of users. And then what sets this type of program apart is, of course, things like on-time performance, which is just looking at percentage of pickups that were made within a designated service window, which is 30 minutes. Also, we examined the trip length and duration to kind of give us a snapshot of the extent of the characteristics of that service. And that trip time is also crucial for this types of service. The kind of performance that this is shortens the trip time for participants, given the fact that it's a direct connect to the door-to-door. And then cost efficiency average, looking at the average cost per trip. So I'll go into some detail for some of those in the later slides. Service demand measures, we know that this is, of course, it's cross-county. So we're going to take a look at time of day trips, but also it performed evening trips, which set it apart from the existing service in the area, as well as some weekend trips. So we looked at the time of day of the week, and also wanted to recognize the ambulatory versus non-ambulatory trips. Again, just to kind of get a sense of the demand for the service in the community. Customer satisfaction measures. In our survey, we wanted to highlight features about the USERV and TBARTA partnership that sets it apart from other services, perhaps. So the ease of scheduling the ride, the reliability of the vehicles as they rely on schedule, the courteous, friendly, helpful, sensitive drivers, as they alluded to earlier, or I think in previous meetings, that you recognize that the staff of the folks have been trained specifically to provide transportation to this population. And also it was important that the riders feel safe from the pickup and through the arrival to destination. And then also we wanted to make sure that the vehicle meets the accessibility needs of the rider. So these are kind of the satisfaction measures that we asked through a survey that TBARTA actually distributed, and we analyzed the data. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of the high-level data sets. Right now, the data that we're reporting on is rooted in a what was characterized as a mid-year report. We only have December, January, February data. The intent of this report that we produce right now was because it was part of the next round of funding requests. So we needed to get this data solidified so they could include it in the funding requests for the next year. So that's why we only have February. And as Chris alluded, there's been more, obviously the ridership is continuing to increase. But again, you could see the trend starting in December. The average daily ridership went from 3.5 to 11, almost 12 trips, and that continues to increase as, actually it's funny, as the news report indicates, the popularity of the program is starting to get people more aware and interested in the service. So this is a trend we're continuing to see even with the lighter data that we did not include in the mid-year report that was submitted to TBARTA as part of their new application with UServe. Another kind of illustration that we wanted to know that was a characteristic of this is that it's cross-county. So we wanted to just take a look at the county trips by the resident of the participant. So you could see that Hillsborough County represents about 43% of the participants, of the trips based on their residency. So Hillsborough County residents constituted 43% of the trips. It's not saying all of them. We actually will go to the next slide that will show kind of the distribution and pattern of travel. But you could see nothing surprising here. The magnitude of the community, Hillsborough County is obviously a large attractor of activities, business, and medical trips. And same with Pinellas County, similarly representing a larger portion. This is our distribution. Fortunately, the partnership with UServe, they provide itinerary level data. So we see origin and destinations, and we're able to recognize and show the distribution of trips across in the cross-county area. So again, what we're looking at is patterns between the counties, and then the large numbers that you see are the inter-county. So those are trips that occurred in the evenings or the weekends, because those are the types of trips that this service provides. Again, nothing really surprising here. Hillsborough County is a big destination and a bigger county. So you're getting a lot of activity in and out of that area. And this is not a reflection of the residency, but just where the trips began and where the trips ended. So it could be a Pinellas County resident that had traveled in the morning to Hillsborough County and was returning from Hillsborough County to Pinellas County. So that would count as a Pinellas to Hillsborough, and then a Hillsborough to Pinellas. So that's what these numbers represent, is where the trip originated on the passenger's journey. So a journey would be multiple trips during the course of their day. Similarly, again, we wanted to get a display of what is going on. And you could see that the trip times, actually not that the average trip time, although 45 minutes seems pretty long, like when you're looking at Pasco County, and 31 minutes in Hillsborough County. That's actually not bad, given the fact that, of course, the times of the day that they're traveling impacts that, and the distance that you're traveling typically across county lines. So this is just, again, a snapshot, nothing surprising here. Places that are a little bit further out, Pasco County, have a little bit longer. But then it depends on, like Hernando County, they had not as many trips that were outside of their service area, so they had some that were internal. So this just gives us a sense of the travel time that the passenger experiences. And because they're traveling alone and not in a multi-loaded vehicle, the trip time is going to be significantly shorter from other experiences. And that's a kind of service quality that I think highlights the benefits of this program. Of course, a big question is always costs, and there are three sort of providers in the system. Wave on the far right that you see is the wheelchair accessible vehicles that UServe would delivers through partnerships. Obviously, that's not surprising. The Wave wheelchair trips are usually the most expensive. This is the cost per mile, cost per trip data. And then the U360 are the services provided directly by UServe. And then UServe has partnered with Lyft for when there's occasions that they can use their services to fill in when demand, especially during certain peak periods, or different types of service, like if there's a scheduled pickup after a doctor's appointment. It's what they call an on-demand service. But you could see very competitive. The UServe services are very competitive compared to the Lyft services, but they're traveling much longer distances, most likely. Another kind of a piece of information we wanted to know was, what are these trips doing? What is the purpose of the trip? And not surprising, a large portion, not really, the majority of the data is going to be related, of the trips are going to be related to jobs and medical. And then, it's very difficult to categorize what we would call other life-sustaining activities. So there was a bunch of other trips that kind of fell into that category, which actually speaks to the value that this program can have. Obviously, the life-sustaining activities like medical and employment are critical to segments of the population being served, but also enriching their lives through social and other life-sustaining activities also kind of speaks to why this program is so important to the community that it serves. It really expands their opportunities and to live a more robust life with opportunities around the Tampa Bay area. This is one of the snapshots of our customer service information that we gathered in our survey. We asked folks on a scale of 1 to 5 to rate characteristics of the service, and you could see that, quality of the ride, driver courtesy, are getting safety, which of course are really important elements for the families and as well as the riders to feel safe and secure in these trips. But the critical thing is that all of them are scoring above 4 on a scale of 5, which is a very good indicator of their feelings and expressions of satisfaction. In fact, some of the concerns about hours of service and weekend was related because they really wanted more, more opportunity to use this service to be able to leverage up, the destinations that they desire to get to. And these last two slides, kind of, because we're talking about the evening and weekend and cross-county service, we wanted to get a sense of how people would use this if this service wasn't around. And you could see that, around 20%, this is the volume of survey respondents, 20%, 6 said they just would not take the trip. Or they'd have, most of them would have to ride with someone, but have to choose that other path. And some are able to use car sharing. But of course, the Uber, Lyft car sharing options are not an option for those who are in wheelchairs, like we saw in the lead up to my presentation today. So this is, again, kind of a snapshot of that. Without this service, at least 20% of them would have not been able to, and then a larger percent would have to rely on others to use that service. And for families that take care of these people, this is a significant quality of life issue that I think is also underscores the challenges that families that have to work with the family members that are reliant on these kinds of services. Similarly, same pattern, nothing very different, some consistency with regards to the cross-county options. If that didn't exist, what would they do? And again, they're relying on some other services. And then again, a portion just would not be able to take the trip. So that kind of quickly goes over the highlights of some of the features. It's obviously, we know it's being well received and the services is very popular with the users. And then we get to a sense of the ridership trends in the area. Again, the data we have is just representing through February. We already are processing data on March and April, and we're seeing the ridership and the participation, as Chris has mentioned earlier, is continuing to increase, which is a great thing for the community. So that was a quick highlight of what we're doing. We actually produced a mid-year report for TBARTA to submit with UServe for CTD, and we'll be following up with a final report that actually is going to look at these patterns again, but also looking at some lessons learned, so that if there are opportunities to improve the service, that they would look in that direction. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and that's my email address in case there are any follow-up questions. And Chris, I don't know if there's Q&A afterwards, but I'm happy to answer any questions if that's appropriate.
I love this program. Girlfriend who has an autistic young adult, and they're looking at putting it in a program in Pasco, and I'm just sending her the information now to have her, sign up for it.
Okay.
Great job.
I have just a few questions and are rather quick. Funding for this comes from
the state, CTD board, which oversees transportation disadvantaged. And there is an innovative transit grant. I don't know the specifics of that, but that's where we're getting most of our money. Riders pay $6 flat fee is kind of the local share each way.
Okay. And you mentioned that the current funding is expiring in June, I believe you said?
June 30th, we have an application pending with the CTD for an extension.
Okay, and when will we get that?
We should know early June.
Okay, all right, very good. Martin, great report, very positive. Yes, this is a great program. My ask to David and Chris down there is, following the board today, are we able to share this with the other transit agencies so they know what we're looking at? Okay, would like to do that. And then if everybody on the committee agrees, I would also like to share this with the Tampa Bay Partnership. They do a lot of studies similar to this. It would be nice if they had a copy of one of our studies to show, I should say one of Martin's studies to show. And if that's okay with Martin to share that also. So my ask is make sure the other transit agencies have it. And then of course, if we could share that with the Tampa Bay Partnership, which is a regional looking partnership, I think they would enjoy seeing this also.
We'll do that, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right. Next item, and we are quickly running out of time, but the next item, I'm gonna turn this over to Brian, but, and he'll give you a little context behind this briefing coming up. But I think this will be interesting and hopefully it helps answer some of the questions we had in the past on CSX. Brian.
At the March joint policy finance committee, brought up the topic of the CSX corridor. He's interested in getting information on previous analysis that has been done.
I'm sorry. The CSX corridor in Hillsborough County was considered in the RTFP. It certainly was not the first or only time that corridor has been considered for passenger rail. There's fewer people with more institutional knowledge about the CSX corridor than Beth Alden, the executive director of the Hillsborough MPO. And for that reason, we've asked Beth if she could just come with us today and just kind of give you an historical overview of what's been done in the past with studying CSX corridor. So Beth, with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Beth is still muted. She's on the line here, but if she unmutes, we'll have her here. Beth, are you there? I see your name.
Maybe a little technical difficulty there. Beth, are you with us? We see you on the screen, but we don't.
I saw her. I saw her log in earlier, and I saw her unmute her mic at one point, but I see it muted now. So she may be running into some issues. She says she sends me a message saying Zoom has locked her up. Hopefully, she'll try to log back in here. Now, my guess is she's. See if we can get her. I have had that happen to me occasionally too. So.
I love Zoom. Looks like she might be trying again.
My guess is I had asked her to log out and log back in, so we'll give her a second. I'll keep an eye on her here to see if she comes back into the meeting.
For the benefit of time, we'll continue to let Beth try to log in, and we'll go right to the other business if there's any other business for the policy committee. I don't believe there is. Okay, and then future meetings. Our next policy meeting is the 16th of July coming up. So is Beth able to join us? Chris, do you see?
Yeah, she just sent me a message saying, fortunately, she's locked up and it will not allow her to quit Zoom. So she's sorry she cannot get back into the meeting.
Okay.
For some reason.
It's your pleasure, Mr. Chair. We can reschedule this for our next policy committee meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. I think this is valuable, and Beth brings a wealth of knowledge to this subject. You know, so it would be nice to first hear from Beth again, and then also get some clarification on CSX. And really what we're trying to get at is where they're at right now, a little bit of background on it, where they're at, and then where they're going. I think that would help us tremendously. So yes, if we can do that, David, that would be great. And if Beth can accommodate, that would be fantastic. So send our regards to Beth, please.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. And with that said, we've covered all the other items, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the May Policy Committee meeting. Thank you.
Mike, they're still hot. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, I know. I thought if I just plugged in, I was good. Huh? Yeah, you know. Is it computer? Yeah. Wait. You have to change this, Jonathan. Your sign to Logitech. Not plug in. Yeah, you hear them. Did this the other day, no problem. You can't hear them? No. I heard some. Is it possible they're muted? Maybe.
Okay, we ready to go?
Proceed.
Okay, call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Friday, May 21st TBARTA board meeting. Rich, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. To the republic.
Jennifer, please call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel,
Here.
Commissioner Long is absent, as well as Mayor Castor, Mayor Kreisman,
Here.
Rich McLean,
Here.
Commissioner Kemp. Here. Commissioner Starkey. Here. Commissioner Bellamy,
Here.
Commissioner Narvarud. Commissioner Flowers will also be absent. Secretary Gwen.
Present.
And Secretary Nandam. Here. We may proceed, but at this point, we don't have a quorum.
Okay, is there any public comments?
There is no public comment.
Okay, thanks. All right, the next item was the consent agenda item, but we do not have a quorum at this juncture. You said we were expecting another member to join.
Yes, Commissioner Narvarud was going to be here, but she, I guess, is not. And Commissioner Kemp said that she had to attend virtually, so
Right.
she is on the line.
I understand. All right, so we will move on to discussion items then. First up is the Transit Management Committee report, and Jonathan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan Roberson, Planning Manager with Manatee County Area Transit. Filling in for Kurt today, who's getting to see his first grandchild for the first time. We're all happy for him. But giving you a quick report on the Transit Management Committee meeting from last week. We had a good meeting, went over a number of things, some of which I think the board has seen before. There was an update on the regional ADA service, the idea of potentially TBARTA being a provider of regional ADA service. TBARTA staff met with the 5 operators in the region and found that there wasn't too much interest in a regional ADA approach. The other thing that the committee went over was also the regional transit options, which you'll see in a forthcoming I think the next presentation here. And there was a lot of robust discussion about the difference between the express bus options and the BRT options, which I think you'll see here soon. There was also an update on the TD Tampa Bay service, the regional transportation disadvantage service seems to be going well, and it looks like they're looking for grant funding for that to continue after June 30th, and we'll be applying for that. And that was really it. I think some of these items you probably already discussed this morning's committees, and we'll hear today. So with that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, unless there's some questions.
Thank you to that report, and congratulations to Kurt for Saul for his new baby there. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Members, any questions for Jonathan? Okay, none being heard. Thank you for that report. Next up is the RRT Express Bus Service update, and Brian, you're recognized for that. Great interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the April board meeting, Scott Pringle presented on a number of express bus and express lane options as an alternative to the RRT. At that meeting, the board passed a motion asking staff to look at 2 additional options. The board also directed staff to work with Commissioner Kemp to come up with a solution that would be suitable, favorable to Hillsborough County. We did that. We met with Commissioner Kemp and her staff twice. And so today, Scott Pringle is going to present 4 alternatives for your consideration. This was an action item, but in light of the fact that we do not have a quorum, it will have to be an information for today. With that, I will hand it over to Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, TBARTA Board. Scott Pringle, please confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Thank you. So just as Brian introduced, as most of you are aware, we've been having this discussion as to what the alternative should be recommended moving forward from our what we call milestone 3 or step 3, so that we can advance it into the remaining steps of the project, which are steps 4 and 5. We started this conversation in January. Since then, we've had some good discussions about some options to that technically recommended alternative that was presented in February. As all of you can recall, at last month's board meeting, we presented a series of information related to an express bus service along the same corridor and the performance of those alternatives. At last month's meeting, a lot of the conversation at the board circled around what we called alternative 6A, a very low cost option with express bus along the entire length of the corridor. At said time, the board did ask us to look at 2 new hybrid alternatives. That is a mix of express bus as well as BRT service along the 275 corridor. So we've done that since last month, and we've just as Brian mentioned, the conversation was, the board instructed us to meet with Commissioner Kemp. We've met with her twice, both discussing some of the elements of the alternatives and we have a 3rd alternative that we're bringing forward that does address some of her concerns that she mentioned last month, as well as a series of data points. So I'm going to go ahead and get into that now. You'll see the 4 alternatives that we've evaluated in this last month. Starting with 6A, that's the same alternative that a lot of discussion at the board meeting circled around last month in April. And that's express bus starting here in St. Pete, working across the Howard Franklin Bridge, at which point that would move into general traffic from West Shore all the way through Tampa into up to Wesley Chapel. Now, alternative A is just that. It's a combination of express bus as well as BRT. In alternative A, you can see that what we're studying or what we're comparing is express bus service coming out of St. Pete, going across the Howard Franklin Bridge, continuing into downtown Tampa. And in order to accommodate that, that does require infrastructure in the State Route 60 West Shore area to accommodate an inline platform to allow riders to access a West Shore intermodal station, and including the infrastructure to sort of slip out of the express lanes, dock at that inline station, and then enter back into the express lanes. Alternative 8B, the 3rd to the right, is very similar to 8A with the exception of adding BRT service in Pinellas. And in both cases, each alternative is looking at BRT service north of downtown Tampa all the way to Wesley Chapel. Another big difference between 6A and the 8 series alternatives is that in 6A, we're looking at 6 stations only, whereas in the 8 series alternatives, we're actually looking at 9 stations. Those 9 stations are 4 in Pinellas, only 3 in Hillsborough County, and then 2 in Pasco County. The 4th alternative that we studied in the last month is 8C. And again, this is a sort of a mixture of some of the elements of the recommendation, including addressing some of Commissioner Kemp's concerns north of Bears Avenue. Whereas we have BRT service in Pinellas County, express bus across the Howard Franklin Bridge, in mixed traffic, so avoiding that cost at the West Shore area until we get to downtown Tampa. At that point, potential for BRT service from downtown Tampa up to Bears, and then from Bears back into mixed traffic all the way up to Wesley Chapel. So before we start talking about the performance of these 4 alternatives, we do want to continue to make the point that the objective of this project was always to be a regional service that was complementary of all the local initiatives. And especially when we start looking at Hillsborough County and only having stops at those major activity centers, you can see that we still have the ability to have those touch points with some of the major initiatives locally, whether it's connections to at USF for the Heart BRT study that's ongoing, or potential conversations around a CSX service or corridor or service on the CSX corridor. Downtown Tampa, we're connecting to a whole host of things, both the potential BRT, any conversations around the CSX, the streetcar extension, even some, kind of longer term conversations related to Brightline being extended from Orlando to downtown Tampa. And then there was the unsolicited bid for additional streetcar infrastructure that was submitted to the city of Tampa. West Shore, we're making connections to that unsolicited bid if that moves forward, that was presented to the city of Tampa. And of course, in St. Pete, we're going to have the Sunrunner up and running here very soon, so we'll be able to directly connect to the Sunrunner. So the point here is, especially in Hillsborough County, it's definitely making those connections. It's definitely complementing those local initiatives. In a lot of ways, having only 3 stations in Hillsborough County kind of changes the characteristic of these alternatives. You're really focusing on those major activity centers, those major employment centers, and getting people to those employment centers, allowing the local initiatives to then take those trips and distribute them within Hillsborough County. So again, here are the 4 alternatives moving from left to right. We do have the capital cost. Again, these are 2020 capital costs. These are the same cost for 6A that were presented last month. You can see the percentage of investment in the alignment, relatively minimal when we're just talking about express bus for 6A, where the majority of that investment is in the alignment or in the stations and the fleet and the services associated with that. Now, when you move to 8A and 8B, out of these 4 alternatives, they are our higher cost alternatives, upwards of, beyond $200 million to construct. And again, I'll remind the board, a good piece of that is that investment in the connection at the West Shore area and through the State Route 60 interchange. So you can see the difference in the percentages, how much investment is going to the alignment versus the fleet. And then 8C is another lower cost option. Again, that's that blend between, using general purpose traffic or express lanes, or even some BRT services within both Pinellas and north of downtown Tampa. So when we look at the ridership performance of these 4 alternatives, you can see the ridership figures here at the bottom of your screen. Any of the bars in the graph that are dark blue, that's 2020 daily weekday riders. The gold is 2030, whereas the teal is 2045. You can see as we look at the pure express bus service, by 2045, we think we could get over 1,000 riders daily on that service. But the minute you start including some BRT service into that investment, you can see the impact it has on ridership. We're at 2045 on 8A, we're kind of anticipating more than 6,000 riders per day, which is 6-fold that of 6A. And then, when we add even more BRT service in Pinellas County under 8B, that gets us past, almost 7,400 riders per day. And then 8C, with a little bit of a dip, but still performing quite well with about 5,700 riders per day. So one of the things that we had a really great discussion with Commissioner Kemp, and Commissioner, thank you for your time, was going through exactly how people are anticipating to use these alternatives. Where are their trips starting and where are they ending? And you'll see here from this graph, this represents the starting point for a lot of these trips in each one of these 4 alternatives, and the destination or where those trips are being attracted to on the right-hand side of your screen. So keep in mind, 6A is express bus service with 6 stations. And we see that the vast majority, or 100% of the trips that are starting in Pasco County, are headed towards primarily Hillsborough County. And you can see the connections there between State Route 56 and the USF area and downtown Tampa. Now, in this scenario, we're seeing about 20% of Hillsborough County trips crossing county lines. A lot of that connectivity is between downtown Tampa and the West Shore area heading towards Pinellas, but we do see some trips starting in the USF area and heading up to Pasco County. But realistically, that's only 20%, whereas 80% of those trips that are starting in Hillsborough are also ending their trip in Hillsborough. Now we look down to Pinellas County, you can see that 80% of those trips that are starting in Pinellas are headed to another county. Predominantly, that's headed towards Hillsborough County, and you can see the strong relationship between both downtown St. Pete and the Gateway area being attracted to the jobs in West Shore and, of course, the employment centers in downtown Tampa. Same graph, same information, but now we're talking about alternative 8A, and this is the BRT service only north of downtown Tampa all the way up to Pasco. Again, 100% of those trips from Pasco are headed towards primarily the Hillsborough area. You can see the strong relationship between those major activity centers in Hillsborough County. A lot of trips being attracted from USF heading to downtown Tampa or even to West Shore. And then with only 5% of the trips really crossing county lines, so a lot of inter-county activity within Hillsborough County. Moving to the statistics on Pinellas, you can see 51% of the trips are crossing county lines. A lot of that activity is between Gateway, West Shore, and downtown Tampa. But we do see areas that are producing trips, which are primarily residential areas, like the area in Pinellas Park, which is generating trips that are both attracted within Pinellas to Gateway, downtown Tampa, as well as points in Hillsborough County. So that's alternative 8A. Now, alternative 8B is very similar to 8A, with the exception that now we're adding dedicated lanes in Pinellas County. Again, same type of travel pattern we're seeing in Pasco. A lot of the, almost 100% of those trips heading towards Hillsborough and some to Pinellas. Same, again, we're not really changing the characteristics in Hillsborough County, so the exact same pattern that we saw in 8A is what's happening with 8B. And then in Pinellas, now we're adding those dedicated lanes in Pinellas County. It starts to change the percentages slightly. Still a very strong connection to Hillsborough County and Pasco, 40% of those trips heading cross county lines. But then you do see strong interconnectivity even within Pinellas County, whether it's folks in Gateway going to downtown St. Pete or so on and so forth. So that was alternative 8B. Now we go to alternative 8C. Again, this is BRT in Pinellas using the express lanes across the Howard Franklin Bridge, mixed traffic from West Shore to downtown Tampa, BRT north of USF to Bears, and then mixed traffic again up to Pasco County. Same thing in Pasco County. 100% of those trips are heading primarily towards Hillsborough County. Same level of activity that we saw in Hillsborough County, where most of the trips are, flowing between those major employment centers. And then again, in Pinellas County, you can see 51% of the trips are heading across county lines. Again, strong connectivity between some of those neighborhoods like Pinellas Park to the employment centers, Gateway, West Shore, downtown Tampa, and downtown St. Pete. So as we discussed last month, another thing that's really important to the project that we certainly track all the way through is how well we're doing in serving folks who need transit to get around, so transit dependent population. 6A, with only 6 stations, we're getting about just over 28,000 transit dependent folks served by that alternative. Whereas when we add the additional 3 stations, all in Pinellas and Pasco, keeping the only 3 stations in Hillsborough County, we do pick up to 34, almost 35,000 folks who would benefit from transit that require transit to get around the region. Same statistic, but now we're focusing on employment and access to jobs. 6A, just under 300,000 jobs that we can get access to from that alternative with only 6 stations. The 8 series alternative with 9 stations, we're getting up to almost 340,000 jobs served by those 3 alternatives. So for conversation today, we did, as requested, start looking at the opportunity to sort of divvy up the pot across the counties in terms of infrastructure costs. So the way we did that is what we're looking at is for the vast majority of this portion of the corridor from downtown St. Pete, including across the Howard Franklin Bridge, which is primarily in all alternatives, just using the express lanes that FDOT's building as part of the Howard Franklin Bridge replacement, is included in the Pinellas pot of funding. From West Shore to downtown Tampa up through the Bears Avenue, we've put into the Hillsborough County pot of funding. And then north of Bears, while still being in Hillsborough County, we've put all investment north of Bears into the Pasco bucket, as it were, mostly because at that point, it's a service directly providing access to those 2 stations in Pasco. So it made sense to include that on the Pasco side of things. Again, you can see the cost here. 6A still the lowest cost option at 48 million. The 2 high cost options at approximately very close. And even though we're adding dedicated lanes, what happens is that when we add dedicated lanes, we're getting faster travel times. We need fewer vehicles. That means we have fewer vehicles to purchase and fewer infrastructure requirements to house and maintain that fleet vehicle. So you can see that offsetting the increased cost in the BRT lane in Pinellas County. 8C, again, another relatively low cost alternative, admittedly just about double 6A, but below 100 million. And then, so what we've done at that point is we start looking at the opportunity for federal grants and state grants. Again, a very similar conversation we've been having for the last several months. For the express bus option, we're not anticipating that project being federalized, so you wouldn't have the opportunity to chase those FTA dollars. And so we're showing a 0 federal share on that alternative and a minimal state share per state policy on that alternative. And you can see the impact that it has on the local investment in that, potential local investment in that alternative, at about 14 million for Hillsborough, 11 for Pasco, and just over 17 for Pinellas. And most of that is related to those fleet vehicles in that operation. Now, when we go to the 8A through 8C series alternatives, because there are elements of BRT in all 3 of those, we do feel that we could potentially pursue FTA dollars. It wouldn't be a fixed guideway BRT project at this point. We wouldn't meet those requirements, but we could do a corridor-based BRT. And so as such, what we've identified is that potentially half of the project could be funded with federal dollars. And you can see that shown here. 25% of the total project being federalized could come from the state New Starts program at another 25%, leaving the county shares shown here. Again, you have the numbers ahead of, in front of you. Hillsborough, just about 22, Pasco, about 22, Pinellas, about 8. Very similar numbers for 8B. And then when we get to 8C, it really is very favorable in terms of the local investment for 8C. You can see the difference here. It's a vast, a really significant improvement in the amount of money required by the local counties, 6 million to upwards of just 9.5 million in Pinellas. And again, that would be something that occurs over 30 years. So a relatively minimal cost to the counties. And a lot of that's because of the benefit of the opportunity to chase those federal dollars as well as those state funding dollars. So just a quick comparison again, these are the 2 low cost options, 6A, 8C, again, 6 stations to 9 stations. Obviously 8C has some of the BRT lanes included, the federal state share included, and again, those local matches that might be required if this project were to be implemented. The 2 comparison here between the 2 high cost alternatives, 8A to 8B, both with 9 stations. Some difference in the amount of dedicated BRT lanes. Again, you can see the cost broken down by county here below. This last couple of slides is focused on the cost to operate the service. So these are purely operational dollars. You can see across the top here, again, 6A being the less cost operating alternative. Whereas the 8 series are relatively comparable across the board, just over 7 to almost 8 million a year. Again, I just want to remind the board, these are $2020 and some of the data is actually pre-pandemic. So those numbers might be higher, but that's the, we're being consistent with the information we've been providing to date. You can see the ridership. And then what we did is we looked at the annual ridership and divided it simply by that annual cost to operate the service. And we got a sort of an operational cost per rider. And you can see that here. Obviously with 6A, we have a lot fewer riders. So the cost per rider is much higher at about almost $23. Whereas the 8 series, we did get that increase in ridership, even though the operations annually are a bit more expensive. And you can see that impact there, just under $10 and just over $8, and then 8C at just over $11. Same conversation on how we break up these costs across in terms of operations. So again, you can see the impact to each individual county. 6A, all of them just, either between $1 and $2 million annually to operate. The 8A through 8B, 8C series, they're anywhere between $2 to $3 million per operate, depending upon the county. Again, just comparison, these are 2 low-cost alternatives, 6A and 8C, and the 2 high-cost alternatives, 8A and 8B in terms of ridership. So that's where we're at today, Mr. Chairman. I'm certainly willing to take any questions, and that concludes my presentation for this morning.
Thank you for that, Scott. Commissioner Kemp, would you like to weigh in before we open this up to general discussion concerning your meetings with staff?
I'll just say this first off. I'd like to thank them for working with me and generating these numbers and having the opportunity to do this and understand it a little. I guess for me, some of the, maybe just a couple questions first. So alternative 6A doesn't involve the big parking, or because it says, I'm looking at mixed traffic there, but does that require the parking garage at Cypress and the catwalk? Is that what you said?
Correct. That is correct. It does not include the inline station at the West Shore area as part of 6A.
Okay.
That helps. That's what helps us keep the cost lower.
Can I just understand something else basic about and this is more from Pinellas. So with Pinellas, already in Pinellas, I saw that the bustle and shoulders being built. So that's being built through the system, and they're going to have express lanes there no matter what. We're going to have express lanes across the bridge. And then maybe Secretary Gwen can answer that. That's accurate?
Well, there will be currently there's express lanes under construction on the Howard Franklin Bridge and through the Gateway project. And although not currently funded, we are planning to bring them all the way down to I-375 and into downtown St. Pete. I think that was your question?
Yeah, so pretty much, though not currently funded, we're looking at express lanes that no matter what this does, you're going to have express lanes going from downtown St. Petersburg to West Shore. Well,
actually, we'll have it with the West Shore Interchange project. We would have it go down
through to downtown Tampa.
Yes, into downtown Tampa. So between downtown Tampa down to downtown St. Pete, and the Gateway project would, although not express lanes, there's fixed toll lanes that would go out to Gateway.
Okay, and for people that are using those express lanes, let's not talk about the buses here, but and I don't understand it quite why the buses can't use it too. They're going to be, are they going to be able to exit from downtown St. Pete? Can they exit at West Shore?
So, well, buses can use it. Buses are actually allowed to use the express lanes, with no charge. So buses are allowed to use express lanes. And we would work with the project to determine how to get the buses in and out at the various locations, including West Shore, depending on the option that's chosen. So there certainly would be an opportunity, just like it would for any vehicles, to get off in the West Shore area But whether there's a specific exit or accommodation for a bus in the, for instance, in the area around the multimodal station that could be built, that would be worked out once we select a project.
So rather than building the big thing in the middle, and I mean, I think it's a terrible idea to put a catwalk across and all that. There will be access for the bus. For instance, if they're coming from downtown St. Petersburg to Gateway to West Shore, there'll be an accommodation for them if express lanes are built from downtown St. Pete, like they're anticipated to be, to West Shore. There will be a way for that a bus as well as a car to get off at West Shore without using that other whatever that is.
Yeah, there would be another option, just like it would, they would have the same options that be available. They can continue going in the express lanes to downtown. They can get out of the express lanes in West Shore. They can take the express lanes up to the airport or up to the veterans. So they'd have the same options as any other vehicle.
Okay. So, and then I just want others to understand that one of my issue with regards to any kind of freeway BRT, which I mean, I guess the freeway BRT going from downtown Tampa up to Wesley Chapel or Bears, whichever options there are, the freeway BRT, that when that is called freeway BRT, that's bus on shoulder.
Correct, Commissioner. We would use the shoulder, one shoulder, and there's enough width in there in the current designs for the TBNX program to allow us to basically paint that shoulder and dedicate it for transit use all day.
I see. So, I mean, it would be better, I think, to describe it as bus on shoulder BRT, but so it is more accurate and easy to understand. But I will tell you that there will always be, I believe, significant opposition to putting in this extra 30 feet of pavement. That's 15 feet going north and 15 feet going south. So it's widening that whole corridor with 30 feet more of asphalt. And what that does to me is I've worked very hard and I very much appreciate what Secretary Gwynn has done in regards to this, because one thing I didn't want to have happen is to have the downtown interchange in Tampa blown up by additional lanes. You know, that was, and as you know, we've had 600 people, we've had MPO meetings into 4 in the morning in opposition to the fixes that were made right now on at this time on our tip. There is even significant opposition to those, and as well as the exit in Ybor. But my fear is I don't want any more lanes coming down, any more asphalt, any more lanes, whether they're today supposed to be dedicated bus on shoulder lanes, but could turn into anything tomorrow, to be headed down into that interchange. And we explicitly, very explicitly took off the planned express lanes that were originally put in that area. So I just like to explain that, because this goes through these very sensitive areas and neighborhoods. I know that besides the right of way that was taken right now, that there's you know, the no other right of way, that you have the right of way, but to put 2 more 15-foot lanes into that interstate, I think, you know, I have no doubt will be and continues to be a area of contention and opposition in Hillsborough County, and would not be, you know, I think ultimately would not be supported. But, you know, the express lanes, the express bus, I'm sorry, is something that we are doing now. But I'd like to go back to the diagrams that you have with regards to who uses this from where. Those were, to me, very illuminating. And you have several of them, I know.
Do you have an alternative in particular?
Right. We'll just look at a few of them. But this three of the four show 5% of the ridership in Hillsborough County crossing county lines. So it's not something in Hillsborough County that we would avail ourselves of as much. You can also see from, and these are all hypotheticals, but 100% of the riders in Pasco cross county lines as opposed to 5% in Hillsborough. And those riders go to the USF area and to downtown Tampa. You have that one little thin line to West Shore. This doesn't change all that much in these scenarios that you put up. I know there's one that says 20% for Hillsborough. The other three say 5%. When you with this, one thing it shows is that there is not even the single crazy transit rider who goes from Wesley Chapel to beyond West Shore. And that is what it's never made sense to me. But what we see is maybe a bigger line. Right now we have substantial Pasco, Wesley Chapel, that route, Wesley Chapel to downtown Tampa, is primarily Wesley Chapel to USF route. And it has ridership from Wesley Chapel to USF. I don't know if they went down 275 instead, they might have more ridership from USF to downtown Tampa. But, basically this isn't really a benefit because we're doing all of this ridership within HART already. And as you can see too, if you look at Pinellas, we have 51% here, but if you go to some of the other scenarios, it's significantly less for Pinellas. It's always like 100% for Pasco. 47, what are some of the 51 and?
So 80,
okay.
51, 47, back to 51.
Got it. Okay. So I guess there are many more people from Pinellas and Pasco, and it's always de minimis service to Hillsborough County riders. But the other area I see is Gateway to downtown Tampa and West Shore. We're already serving. I don't know if there's two gateways, but we're already serving. Downtown. We're already doing this with express routes, and if the express lanes are going to be there, that serves as purpose. But I guess seeing this and looking at apparently, and the other ones of these are internal routes in Pinellas County that they're already serving, the 54, Tropicana, and 4th Street. And my other question about this in terms of the ridership is we're seeing per trip. So when we see, and maybe Mr. Pringle, you can confirm this. So when we see a ridership out in 2045 of being 7,400 daily riders, that's one ride of somebody coming from Wesley Chapel to USF or downtown Tampa, and then a second ride of them going back. Is that accurate?
Right, those numbers are boardings. So if there's someone who's traveling from Pasco to go to an employment center in downtown Tampa, that would be one boarding, and then their return trip home in the afternoon would be a second boarding. So that is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner, to about the Hillsborough County, for the rest of the board, just, when we only have those 3 stations in Hillsborough County at those major employment centers, it really does fundamentally change the alternative as a whole. You're really looking at just serving those employment centers and bringing in trips from the counties to get to those jobs.
Right. And as I think is wise, otherwise it becomes, you're duplicating the service that HART already provides and provides robustly. we have routes now that are at least, up to 2,000 and 3,000 are big routes a day. And we're looking at this, which is, it just strikes me that from all of these numbers, so obviously demonstrate where the need is and where the most efficient use of our transit dollars can be invested and how they can be invested. And it makes sense to me that looking at this, that there might be a best scenario for a one seat ride from maybe downtown Tampa to we already do downtown Tampa to Britain Plaza to Gateway on the other side, but not Gateway Carilion, I guess. But there might be a route that is needed to be generated from downtown St. Petersburg to West Shore that way. There might be a route that could be generated from Pasco County into Hillsborough, and those would be the express routes that would, could serve most of this in the, best way. And I'm just wondering about FDOT. I know you fund 3-year routes and then turn it over to the agencies, but the best way that this seems to work is if FDOT were to fund express buses to serve these two smaller portions of this route. I'm just wondering, Secretary Gwynn, I know they're not asking you. I'm asking you, but to me, it would make sense that those two services, PSTA and the Pasco Transit Service, would make some requests like this for FDOT funding of those routes.
Yeah, so what I can do is, let me do a couple things. The first thing I would like to do is just to make sure everybody understands what the commitment FDOT has made regarding the shoulders. So north of I-4, where we talked about the shoulders, if we did not have this project and we do a project on that, whether it be a resurfacing or adding a lane, our standards are to add a 12-foot shoulder on the outside of the road. That's typically there for breakdown lane, for law enforcement, for those sorts of things. We were not proposing to add a 15-foot bus lane in addition to that. Essentially, what we would be doing is adding 6 feet of pavement, 3 on each side, that would widen the lane, the shoulder, from 12 feet to 15 feet. And then and also I think Scott may have mentioned that it was only for the use of buses. It also would be used for breakdown. It would be used for other things. And in those cases, the buses would have to go around those vehicles should there be an incident. Hopefully with 15 feet, there'd be enough room for the vehicle to pull over to the far right and the bus would still be able to get past it within it. But it's not an additional 2 15-foot lanes. It's actually additional 3 foot on each side. And what we've committed to do since the beginning, if this project goes forward and there's an option for bus on shoulder as what I would call an incidental cost to the construction or a slight incremental cost, we would agree to harden and widen the 3-foot additional shoulders to accommodate the buses. And we'd include that as highway costs. That would not have to be a cost of the project. But I guess it's good to remind everybody of just some of the rules we have that we have to abide to when we look at funding transit from FDOT, and also some items that are in the works that may be available to us soon, but I want to make sure everybody's aware of kind of what they are. So on the capital cost side, your rolling stock, your vehicles, your stations, construction that is primarily or solely for the use of the transit vehicles and transit system, we are statutorily limited to providing only 50% of the non-federal share. So there would still need to be an equal commitment from the local agencies for those construction costs. That's a statute. That's not something we can change. And that's exactly what it was on Sunrail, where the locals had to pay 25% The state paid 25% and the federal government paid 50%. On the operations side, it's a little more tricky, but we can provide some operations support, and we do, like you mentioned, for sometimes a 3-year period for a project. But there is a draft policy right now within the department that we think is going to become policy that would give more flexibility to the districts to help fund operational costs. And that means there could be money available that in the past we could not use to help support transit operations that we will be able to use in the future. But there's a couple of caveats with that policy that I think are important, because it's going to require others outside of this board to give their approval, if you would, to be able to do that. So we would be able to use a portion of what's called district dedicated revenue to use for operational funds for projects for up to a 5-year period. The only caveat is that it should be somewhat graduated in terms of it may be 100% in the first year or the second year, but at some point it starts to graduate down. And at the end of the 5th year, it would be turned over to whoever is going to commit to operate and maintain it after that 5-year period. It's important because we would have to have that commitment before we could dedicate any of our funds to go to providing the operational assistance in those 5 years. Somebody would have to sign an agreement saying after the 5-year period, or if there's years within the 5-year period where we don't do 100%, maybe we do 100% the first year, 80% the second, and so forth, that they would pick up the remainder of that cost. There also in that policy requires that the MPOs need to acknowledge that this is not new money and that this money may come from other MPO priorities that they may have otherwise been used for. So that would require the MPO to do that. And the MPOs would also have to add the project to their priority list and keep it on the priority list for all 5 of those years of the support. The other item I'll bring up, because this gets asked a lot, has to do with toll revenue from express lanes. Can that be used for helping to support transit operations? The answer is yes, but again, there are distinctions in there that have to be kept in mind. One is it's there to support express bus and express lane. So it can't be used to support operations that are outside of the express lanes. It's strictly for the express lane operation portion of a system. The other thing that is that it does need to be spent in the county in which it's collected. And then also for the actual, I guess, getting to those revenues, it is after a couple of other items. In other words, we have to pay for the cost of collecting the tolls. We have to pay for the toll equipment maintenance and operations. And then what's left over would be potentially be able to be used for operations. Just for a reference point, in South Florida, what they've told us is that they, up until this last year, were able to access about $5 million a year in their system to use for express bus operation support. Last year, it dropped to $2 million, primarily because during a lot of the pandemic, there weren't as many people using the express lanes. But that's a mature system that has a pretty good amount of length to it. When you look at ours, 5 years from now, we'll have a system that goes from Gateway up to the end of the Howard Franklin Bridge. It's probably going to be 10 years before we get the express lanes opened from all the way from downtown St. Pete up to downtown Tampa. So there's no guarantee that in the early years there'll even be enough tolls. But at some point when the system gets mature, that revenue would be available. So certainly there are ways for us to participate in helping to fund the project, but I wanted to make sure that if you would, the rules or the procedures that we have to follow are known so that there's no confusion as to what we can and can't do.
And I appreciate all those clarifications. And, I speak and say FDOT, understanding that basically FDOT's a proxy for the state legislature and the decisions that are made in terms of transit and transit funding, and transit is about, it's just not about capital, except for buying the buses, but then those have to be replaced. It's about operations, 70 and 80% being spent on operations. And, you know, I'm looking at doing the most efficient job we can on this. But it was very illuminating to me to see charts like the one that's up here now in terms of how the ridership, you know, where the ridership is and where, or the projected hypothetical ridership. But even at the 2045 level, even at the most expensive capital expenses and everything put in there, the ridership compared to just our regular routes, the ridership on this is, to me, staggeringly low relative to other internal routes within our system and needs within our system, within Hillsborough County. So with that, I'll just.
Thank you for those comments, Pat. One question of clarification I had for Secretary Gwynn. So as I understand it from your analysis, the only widening that would occur in, for example, alternative 8C would just be along the freeway BRT, and that's 3 feet on each side. Is that correct, Secretary?
Yeah, and I apologize. Some of the alternatives run together, and I don't have the exact one. Well, I guess I see 8C up here on the board now. So anywhere where we would have a shoulder used for buses, we would widen it 3 feet beyond what our shoulder would be without the buses.
Yeah, that's what I was basically getting at. In alternative B, 8C provides a very small area there where that could be done with, I would think, very little impact. I mean, that's a discussion for when we probably vote on this, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew that there's not a huge widening that occurs other than from, looks like from downtown Tampa north to probably, I guess that's Bears or so there, which I don't know. Obviously, I can see neighborhood opposition to huge expansions of freeway because of noise and all the other issues. I don't know whether 3 feet beyond normally would have to be done is that significantly impactful or not. That's a question for debate. Members, other questions and comments? I assume everyone probably has something. Cliff, why don't we start with you and go around this way so everyone. Yes.
CLC mitigation, not voice.
So
CLC mitigation.
I think it's beneficial for staff to go through the concerns of all the board members, data study accordingly.
We have somebody, I believe Commissioner Kempster still live.
And I think it's
let's turn on your thing there. And yeah, there we go.
I think it's very informative for the report to be updated to take those considerations into its final analysis. It did come out of it that appears to be a good alternative. I'm kind of impressed with the details and some of the things C and HC.
Is someone else speaking on Zoom?
Okay.
The alternative 8C that's come out of this effort to kind of take a look at some of the details downtown Tampa and other places in order to come up with something that appears to have increased the ridership and lowered the cost, appears to me to be something to look into in more detail. I'm glad Commissioner Kemp had a chance to kind of weigh into those things as she moved forward. I would like to remind the board that we're talking about transit type projects. Transit projects like this require some asphalt. We can't be anti-asphalt. I mean, if we're going to build transit systems and they're not going to be rail, we are going to be building new asphalt. We're going to be putting down hardened lanes. We're going to be expanding infrastructure, and we're going to be building roads. And most roads being constructed in urban areas do generate some opposition, but if you want the long-term transit benefits actually accomplished, you got to push through those or you're not going to build anything.
I also would like to kind of mention to the board, you know, we're a transit authority. We've invested in a lot of different kinds of programs over the years, you know, that bring benefits to the public. Our van pool program is an example. But if we can't bite into a major transit project and convince the legislative authority that we've actually accomplished something that moves people efficiently between St. Pete and Wesley Chapel, I don't think we have a lot to show for our efforts.
Yeah, that's a point well taken. And I'll remind everyone too, that when we started this endeavor, we were aiming to get federal funds. And I think this, you know, this alternative HC seems to have a little of everything in there for everyone. That's a viable compromise for concerns from Hillsborough County about widening the expressway, but also lowering their share of dollars and relying more heavily on a federal match here, which the pure express services don't really do. So I would think those offsetting concerns might you know, suggest that that alternative is the better one for consideration. But
we kept a federal share, fairly significant federal share. It also has a fairly good ridership projections. Then it lowered across the board all the local contributions. So it seems to me that it has a lot of lift in it from the conversations that have been brought back to us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cliff. Rich?
Thank you, Chair. Before I get started, Scott, can you bring up the slide that showed the percentage of travel into and out of the different areas? Just the first one would be fine, the very first one you showed. Yeah, just those. But I want to first start off with thanking both Commissioner Kemp and Scott Pringle and their teams to get together. I think what they worked out was some different ways to look at this also, in terms of how we can do this, how we can do it differently, how we can make it work with the local transit agencies in the regions that we're dealing with. And so hats off there. And I think it helped all of us out greatly as we looked at it from a different kind of standpoint, if you will. There's one, and I'll agree with Commissioner Kemp. I think the regional transit agencies are doing a phenomenal job supporting their local communities. HART, as you know, I sit on that board. HART does a phenomenal job supporting the folks within Hillsborough County and all. So there's no disregard there. The reason I asked Scott to bring up this slide is because Commissioner Kemp looked at it one way, and I look at it a different way. I look at it and I see the pipelines coming into and out of the different communities. And as Commissioner Kemp mentioned, a great deal coming into Hillsborough from other counties, whether that's Pinellas, Pasco, Manatee, it doesn't matter. What I see there, though, is commerce. I see people coming into Hillsborough to work. I see people coming into Hillsborough to shop, entertainment, dine, and take part of Hillsborough County. And I see that as a boom, not as something that's a detractor. And I think it's something that benefits Hillsborough County substantially. And I think if you talk to the employers there, I think you would agree with that. And so I don't think we can just easily, and this is no disregard for the comments Commissioner Kemp meant, I don't think we can disregard that flow in as something we either don't support or somebody else should support it. I think that's part of the region now. And we see it both ways, but so I look at that a little differently, and that's an asset we got coming into Hillsborough County, taking advantage of a lot of the amenities we have there, and also providing a good workforce for Hillsborough County. So I just want to mention that because I do look at that totally differently, and I look at that as a positive, not as a negative. So
thank you, Rich. Commissioner Starkey.
Yeah, I would.
You hit your
I guess after a while it goes off. I would absolutely echo the comments that Rich just made, that a lot of Pasco residents are coming in and spending a lot of money and generating a lot of economic benefit in Hillsborough County. And frankly, same for Pinellas County. I'm still of the opinion like I mentioned before, and I think Mayor Kreisman did, that to just have a regular bus, we're just gonna get those disadvantaged folks that can't drive for whatever reason. If we don't have the dedicated lanes and the more predictable reliability, we're not gonna get the workforce using the buses. So I still think we should try for 8B. I think things are teed up perfectly for us right now with what the secretary is saying. I think our legislature put a lot of money into transportation this year that's sitting there for the next few years. We have a climate in Washington that wants to fund transit. And I'm not ready to give up what I think is the best transportation project that we can bring forward. Southern Florida, Orlando has had great support from the legislature and FDOT in their transit solutions. Ours is still much less than what they spent. And I think it really hits us economically to not have a regional transit program here. I know that we've lost out on some big economic opportunities because we didn't have one. We couldn't even qualify. So I'd say let's still go for what could be the best for the area, and see what we can get. Look what happened with our legislative request. We were ready to pull the 1.5 million, and now we've ended up hopefully getting it. So I think the climate is right to move this forward. And I think we've got Secretary Gwynn saying they're going to really help us. We also have a very strong legislative delegation from this area that may be able to help us too. So I'm still saying let's swing for the fence and go for 8B.
Thank you for those comments. Mayor Kreisman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's been some great comments that have been made by this board, and I appreciate all of the work that Scott, you and your team have done. I think it's important that you had those conversations with the commissioner, with Commissioner Kemp. And I think we've got some really interesting alternatives to look at now today. I don't think that we necessarily had at the last meeting, and that's not to say the work that you all had done wasn't important before, but you know, I think the more options we've got available to pick from and choose from, the closer we are to getting to where we want to be. You know, I agree. You know, you look at that slide that talks about the cross-county travel and how most of it is going into Hillsborough right now from Pasco and Pinellas, and I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that you know, Hillsborough County and in particular downtown Tampa, you know, the number of businesses and office complexes that are there, that it is such a business hub right now that a lot of folks that live in my city or in Pinellas County, you know, that work in Tampa, this is going to provide a way of them going to work without having to get in their car, potentially. And I also think, and certainly, obviously, I'm hoping that as we continue to build more office and expand our office capabilities in St. Pete, we might see some of those Hillsborough County residents coming across the bay down the road back into St. Pete, utilizing this mass transit. I always look at the numbers, and Commissioner Starkey, I love to shoot for the sky too. I agree with you. But when I look at these numbers and then I look at the per rider cost, right now, 8C to me gives us the biggest bang for the buck again. You know, at the 11.33 cost per rider, that one slide, there it is. The number of riders we get, you know, going from that to versus the cost of the project itself to 8B, we don't get as many riders versus what the cost of the infrastructure is. And that's the only hesitation that I have is when I look at that. So, you know, again, I would ask the question as we get toward a place where when we have a quorum, we can make, you know, a formal recommendation. How convertible is 8C if we were to go in that direction to getting where ultimately we wanted to go, which is down the road, potentially having a complete BRT route, or even whether it moves into a light rail or some other more hardened type of transit system. So I think that's something I'd be real interested in getting some more information on. Because I just, as I look at the numbers, that's what I keep focusing in on.
Well, I think the good thing about not having a fixed guidance system is you can easily convert it to something else later on.
That's
And of
right.
course, always use the extra small lane space for emergency vehicles or whatever it needs to be at the time. And that was the beauty of the system. And, you know, to that point too, I would, if for example, Hillsborough County and Tampa get the CSX line and rail has succeeded, I'd like to know how this would integrate into that, or could be converted and working together and not being competitive issues. So Commissioner Bellamy, your thoughts on this from Manatee County?
I wish. I wish. Anytime you have a project like this, you're going to have a lot of moving parts. And I'm in support of making sure something moves forward. And here's the reason why. There's a lot of growth in the state of Florida. There's a lot of growth in our region. And growth is smothering Manatee County because we have a lot of traffic issues. And what we want to do, Representative TBARTA, is make sure we identify those needs, regardless of whereabout in the region, and make sure we identify a project and move forward with it, because I don't think we're going to go away from the growth. I think it's going to be here, so we need to embrace it. And I agree with transportation brings commerce, and you know they're traveling, and regardless of where they're going to find some way to impact the economy, coming or going. Just with gas prices and things like that alone. I looked at 8B and 8C, but I don't really have a because of where I am. But I will say this: one of the things that's noted up there is that these estimates are for 2020 dollars, right? And what I'm learning in this industry is the longer, the decisions take, the more impact it is going to be the dollar. And the dollar doesn't go down, the dollar's going up. The dollar's going up. So my thought would be, due to the fact that we need a major traffic project, we need to make sure we identify that connectivity to federal dollars, right? I think we need to make sure that we identify something and move forward. My final take would say, we need a bridge in Manatee County, and there's a lot of transportation issues there. So whatever the opportunities are with those federal dollars, once we identify something here, please support me so we can identify something there and we can move forward.
Thanks for those comments, and completely agree with that. That's the whole idea of the system, is to eventually get everything connected. That's why we're here. Secretary, any comments?
Thank you, Mr.
No, sir,
Chair.
only what we talked. I don't know if LK got a comment.
Yeah, hey, David, I think the chair was referring to me. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I really like the way the information is presented, and the data, the way it's shown. Completely agree with member Rich McLean, what he said. Obviously this shows that there is regional benefit pursuing this project, and the connectivity between the Tampa Bay area, and some point into Manatee County, and there's definitely benefit pursuing this project. I really, between 8B and 8C, I really don't have an opinion per se on which one to pursue. But the one thing that I would say is, you got to always look at what's the maximum bang for the buck, right? What is the rate of investment, return on the investment, and that's what I would look at. I agree with the mayor on as it relates to, the user cost, right? What does it take for how much money are we spending per user for running this transit service? So that's a point of fact that we need to take into account when we are making the decision.
Thank you for those comments. Members, we're running a little.
I'd like to just respond for a second to a couple things. I'll be fast.
Very, very quickly, please, because then we have to move on with the remainder of the program.
Sure. Yes, thank you. I just like to remind, and I don't disagree about the regional, needs or that benefits. Just in terms of, how desperately underfunded our transit system is here. That we're looking at how we can best serve and do the service in Hillsborough County and serve the most people efficiently with our very limited dollars. And second, I'd just like to remind everybody, we're already doing all of this. We're already doing it with our express bus routes that we have in place right now to any of these areas. And those were, as the road changes, those express routes will be using these at any already. But the other thing is and I'd like to point this out, we're doing a very important project within Hillsborough County that's from downtown to USF directly along Florida Avenues, totally parallel to the interstate, where our number one most busy route is parallel to the interstate, and then across to USF, a BRT, I hope pretty gold standard BRT actually, down there. And that can obviously be used as well by any, in any capacity that is from USF to downtown and right at street grade level already. But as to just also, I'd like to respond to what Mr. Holden said about CSX. Not only do we need the CSX route going from the university to downtown, which is the most dense transit area in the entire region for use, that piece right there. But we not only need that, but we need the Florida Avenue on the west side of the interstate going to USF, this BRT. We need our route on Nebraska Avenue that also goes to USF on the other side. Plus we have multiple routes all within. So I don't see that, it's not, you don't use just one route north-south. We have like probably 10 parallel routes north-south through this area that will all have more ridership than this. But I'm just trying to kind of explain what we have here, and CSX would not be competitive. Or I mean, it's the need that we're already filling that's already there. We have loaded buses and people wanting to take them. And we've only gotten down to 15 minutes for a few routes more recently. So that's kind of the status of in Hillsborough County.
Well, thank you for that project. And I think it will be helpful when the board takes a vote on this to go over this once again. And it would be helpful maybe if staff would have some analysis of what HART is actually doing in Tampa too, so we can see how these things are not duplicative or repetitive. So, and I assume, David, we're going to schedule upon a quorum, we'll schedule this for a vote to advance, and hopefully at the next meeting we'll be able to do that. But Pat, those comments are extremely helpful because none of us here want to replicate service that's already planned or in effect now. We want to all be complementary. Of course, we as a board are statutorily prohibited from getting into the rail discussion. That's principally a Hillsborough County issue. And I know that you and others there have been leaders in that effort. And, so we can congratulate you and want to work with you on that, but we're constrained as to what we can do. But we certainly want to make sure that the service we eventually try to move forward will always be complementary and not competitive with what's going to happen in Tampa internally. So that said, I think we need to move on. And to that end, Commissioner Starkey, you're recognized for the legislative subcommittee report.
So we had a report from Ron Pierce, and I'm hoping, is he still on, to give us an update from there. Hey, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman. I know we're tight on time this morning, so just a couple of updates. Number one, as I reported at your last meeting, The legislature has completed the legislative session on April the 30th. The 1.5 million that I reported at our last board meeting was included in the final budget that will be sent to the governor. The governor has not received the budget yet, so let me preface that. While the legislature's passed it, it's not final yet. We have talked to the governor's office. Shared a bunch of information with them. They didn't seem to have a lot of questions. We've also asked a couple of key legislators to also reach out to the governor's office in support of our line item. We've also got a couple of our board members reaching out to the governor's office, as well as a couple of, again, key legislators asking them to reach out and support. So the 1.5 million is non-recurring DOT trust fund dollars. We don't want to have we do not want that to have an impact on our transit partners. So we are going to set up a meeting with Secretary Gwen and also with DOT in Tallahassee to talk about how we could possibly try to minimize the impact on our transit partners here in the region. So again, we expect the governor to probably get the budget probably sooner rather than later. There's a bunch of dollars in back of the bill that once that's approved, those are dollars that could be spent this year. So again, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, the governor will get that and will act. I also want to report to you all that our Enabling Act language, we had 2 standalone bills in the House and Senate, was included as a part of the DOT package in a Senate Bill 1194 by Senator Hooper. That our language was included in that, which has not been sent to the governor yet. The governor has not approved this. We do expect the governor to approve this bill. Probably the biggest thing that it does for us is allow the mayors to appoint a designee from their city councils. So that will help us hopefully from a quorum standpoint moving forward in the future. And again, that will go into effect once the governor gets it and signs it. It will go into effect on July 1st, 2021. Just a couple of legislators we probably want to have the board thank. Number one, President Wilton Simpson. He was instrumental in getting the dollars into the Senate budget and ultimately getting it in, making sure that the House agreed that in conference. So Senate President Wilton Simpson was instrumental. Also, Senator Boyd from down in Manatee County, he was a sponsor on the Senate side, as well as Representative Jackie Toledo in Tampa. So all of them were instrumental in making sure that those dollars got into the budget. So on the language for our Enabling Act, we need to thank Senator Hooper. He was instrumental in making sure that that got into the package, the DOT package, as well as Senator Roussan. Again, he was very involved in that, and Representative Mariano in Pasco County. So it was a team effort from the region. As you can see, we've got members of the legislature from down in Manatee and Hillsborough and Pinellas and up in Pasco that were instrumental to making sure that TBARTA had a very successful session. So I will pause there to see if anybody has any questions or comments.
Any questions? Ron, after we ended our meeting, I did make the suggestion that we had done this in the past, that we go back again and invite a legislator to attend a meeting. And so it's my suggestion that as we move around, that we invite a legislator from that area to come and talk to us, and we need to thank them and make sure they see the good work that we're doing. So wondered what you thought about that.
I think that's a great idea, and I'm happy to work with David and staff to be able to make that happen for not only for a future board meeting, but maybe also for one of our legislative meetings as well. So I'm happy to do that. Commissioner, let me point out too, and it's probably timely too, because I know we're talking about, last session, which just ended on April 30th, but next session is going to start in January, which means committee weeks start in September, which means ultimately we need to start thinking about next year's agenda a little bit sooner rather than later. And so I think we need to make sure that, the 1.5 is approved as this year's budget, make sure that 1194 signed by the governor. But I think we can then start thinking about what is our agenda for next year. I think having a couple of key legislators come in and make sure they're a part of that discussion and ask them some suggestions on, maybe the direction they want us to go could be helpful as well. We're also working with, David and staff on making sure we communicate with legislators in the off season on all the things we're doing, not only from, as we talk about, the project from Wesley Chapel down to St. Petersburg, but also make sure we're talking about, let's talk about transportation disadvantage and crossing county lines. That's a really important project that, And we talked about earlier, one of the committee meetings, that's something our legislators need to know that we're working on, that is truly having a regional impact. And so we're going to make sure we help staff message that and get that out to all of our legislators as well.
And our tram and the other cool things that we're working on. So we want to make sure they get to hear our story. All right, thank you so much. No more comments. All right, we'll move on to federal. Hello, Harry.
Hello, Commissioner. Thank you. I know you're running late, so we'll be very brief. What we said at the Legislative Committee meeting is a couple things on the budget front. The President will submit his fiscal year 22 budget on May 28th, which is a week from today. The President overall is requesting a 16% increase in non-defense discretionary spending. So presumably that would be good news for transit programs, but we'll give you a full update on that next week when we see the budget. On the infrastructure, as you know, if you've been following, this has been Infrastructure Month in Washington. The White House, the House, and the Senate continue to try and negotiate out a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, but they're still far apart on what they're agreeing to. They haven't defined what infrastructure is, how far beyond traditional roads, highways, bridges, and transit will this package go. They haven't decided on how much to spend, and they haven't decided on how to pay for it. So there's a lot of issues still to go. I think the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee is talking about marking up the highway portion of this bill next week. In the Senate, the highway and the transit components of transportation are two separate committees. And so the Banking Committee, which handles transit, hasn't made any decisions on that yet. So still to be determined. The House was going to mark up its bill this month, but the chairman of the committee has postponed that until June. The House is actually in recess for 3 weeks now until June 14th, so members won't be back in Washington until then. The Senate's in session 1 out of the next 3 weeks. So they'll probably not see a lot of action here until June, but we'll continue to work on that. The last thing is Steve had given an update to the Legislative Committee. There was a bill introduced by Senator Schumer and some other members in the Senate to provide $75 billion in new funding for electric bus vehicles, which would be a huge investment in that over a 5-year period. That would certainly benefit TBARTA in the acquisition of any future rolling stock that you all have. So that would be a major initiative. And given that Senator Schumer is the majority leader in the Senate, likely that would be included in any final infrastructure package. So with that, Madam Chair, happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, but let me ask my fellow board members first. Okay, on that, the money for the electric buses, would that include money that would allow for the construction of facilities that would support the electric buses, some capital?
It would include facility equipment to charge them, whether it's solar or to plug them in, or in route charging stays, hardware. That's some transit agencies using. So yes, it also, interestingly enough, includes money for worker training to train a new workforce to maintain electric vehicles. That's been an area of interest to transit agencies, is we've got to train up new people to deal with this new equipment. And so there's actually money in there for training purposes too.
I like that. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's the end of the legislative committee
Thank
report.
you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll turn to finance, and Rich, you're recognized to give that report.
Mr. Chair, as mentioned earlier, Commissioner Long could not join us today, and therefore I was chair in that meeting. We did have two topics. The first one is the April financials. Is Melanie with us? Hey, Melanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so for the April report, year-to-date through the month of April, we had a net surplus of $349,000. This surplus was $23,000 under the budget of $373,000. On the revenue side, we were under budget at $1.8 million, and this was primarily due to the timing of the PD&E and the technology project. And corresponding with that, we were also $1.8 million under budget for the expenses in all categories. Looking at the balance sheet, our accounts receivable balance at the end of April was $594,000, and then our accounts payable was $382,000. And at the end of April, our cash balance was $542,000. And that concludes the summary report for April.
Any questions?
Great report. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, great report. And as Commissioner Long would always say, we have money in the bank. So
Yes, yes, we did.
thank you, Melanie. Our second topic was going to be the 2020 audit results, but however, we need to make a vote on that if I'm not mistaken. Therefore, I guess we will need to move that to the next meeting. Unless there is a,
Come right back in the door real quick.
well,
we didn't have a quorum
We still
anyway.
have a quorum anyway.
That's right, you're right. So-
Okay. So we'll have to push that off to the next meeting, Chair. if
Get
you
that
don't mind.
report in the vote.
Yeah,
at a time.
that's a very positive report. So so good on Melanie and David and the team. But I'll let them brief that, if you don't mind, at our next meeting, which I believe is the 16th of July.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that needs to be issued by June 30th. So we will need the approval of the board on that. And someone can clarify that for me, but I believe that's correct.
Yeah, Melanie, I think we can finalize it before the 30th and then have the board accept that in July is what we typically see with clients. So we can definitely make that happen.
The board can ratify the final.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that help.
And thank you, Lance, for your appearance today. I know that unfortunately we didn't have a quorum, but appreciate your briefing earlier this morning in the Finance Committee.
Certainly. Thank you.
That ends the Financial Committee report.
Thank you. And you're still recognized then for the Policy Committee.
Good. We'll talk on one item, Mr. Chair, and that will be the TD Tampa Bay mid-year report. And I believe I'm looking at, to help us with that, is Chris, you've got that?
Yes, sir. Good morning and thanks, Rich. During the Policy Committee meeting, a Bay News 9 news story was shown. The news story was about a gentleman in a motorized wheelchair that uses the TD Tampa Bay service and how it provides him with the freedom he's always wanted. In addition, Martin Catala with the Center for Urban Transportation Research from USF presented the mid-year report on the TD Tampa Bay service. In that report, Cutter evaluated transit performance, service demand, and customer satisfaction. And the mid-year report is included in your board report. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, and I'll close with just saying, very good article within Bay News 9 on our services. It also touched on our increase in ridership from 70 the initial month to over 700 for April. So very positive. So the word's getting out, and it's interesting. It's mainly word of mouth getting out there, and it's doing well. So fantastic. And that will end my committee report also.
Thank you for that, Rich. Next is my report. I'll be brief. We obviously started the legislative session on a very low note in terms of what Senator Brandis was attempting to do, and we ended on a very high note in getting our budget and our enabling legislation modified. So kudos to staff and our lobbyists and to all you board members for the excellent work you did in helping to facilitate that, moving things along. So now we have to keep the momentum going and get a project going here, I think was the spirit of today's discussion. So with that said, we look forward to at the next meeting, hopefully having a quorum. David, where is our next meeting going to be?
It'll be here in July.
Okay, it'll be here, and I would encourage everyone to try to make sure they can attend that so we can advance a choice on the selection of the RRT project we recommend. That said, I don't have anything further. David, I'll recognize you for the executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to thank PSTA for organizing a great ribbon cutting in Dunedin on Wednesday. This was an event to launch the AVA shuttle pilot that'll operate there through August before moving to Clearwater Beach in September. Another ribbon cutting will be on Friday, June the 4th for the Bus on Shoulder pilot we're also helping to fund. So if any board members are available to attend, we would love to see you there. Related to the AVA shuttle pilots, we have a potential opportunity to participate in a third that would operate along 22nd Street in St. Pete. PSTA spoke to a researcher at Cutter who wants to study how various demographics respond to AV technology. The pilots so far have been in more touristy areas, so this would provide information about how another type of community perceives autonomous vehicles. Our agreement with PSTA committed up to $400,000 for the 2 pilots, but we'll end up spending much less than that due to cost sharing of the contract that they negotiated with the vendor. So this third potential pilot wouldn't require any additional money than was already approved. We would just need authorization to spend it on the third pilot. PSTA is still discussing the idea with the city of St. Pete, but this is an item that we may bring back to the board in a few months for action. Secondly, I want to mention that we are again on the hunt for office space. You may recall that FDOT graciously made some space available to us at the Centerpoint office building in West Shore. That lease runs through the end of next June, so we're beginning to put out some feelers for where we might be able to land next. And then finally, I want to announce that TBARTA received 2 more awards for our regional TDP and Vision 2030. Last month, we received 2 awards from the Hillsborough County Planning Commission. This week, we were notified by APTA that we received 2 first-place AdWheel awards. APTA is the American Public Transportation Association, which is a national transit advocacy organization, and their AdWheel awards recognize the marketing and communication efforts of their members. One award was in the electronic media category, and the other was in the comprehensive campaign category, and both were for best marketing and communications to highlight transit needs. Besides the local recognition from Hillsborough, we also previously received state-level awards from FPTA. So it's pretty amazing to now receive national recognition. And I again want to thank staff and the Tyndale Oliver team for all the hard work that they obviously put into this project. As a reminder, again, we have no meeting in June, which is one of our off months. Next meeting is July 16th, again here at PSTA. We added several new future meeting topics to the agendas. The FY22 budget will be presented to the Finance Committee in July, and then we'll go to the full board in August. We'll provide an update of the NASA Vertiport model results and show you how that's shaping up. As mentioned earlier, we have the annual performance review of BMO, which we'll do in July. We have a presentation for the annual progress report for Vision 2030, which will be July. We have the election of board officers in August, and then we still have the FDOT Safe Trip presentation that we still need to schedule. Unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
The staff reports are just informational, included within the packet. Do you have any comments about those?
No comment.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you for that report. So members, any questions for David before we hear the presentation? None, move forward then. Presentation is David Sobosh. You're recognized for the Tampa Bay Partnership Job Access Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everybody hear me at least? We'll start with hearing me.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now the delicate part, the sharing of the screen. Good morning. It is still morning. I'm Dave Sobosh, Director of Policy and Research with the Tampa Bay Partnership, and I'm pleased and very excited to be able to share with the TBARTA board the results of our job access study, which we've recently completed and released. Just a little bit of background on the study. It was incited by and builds upon a report that came out about a decade ago from the Brookings Institution called Missed Opportunity, Transit and Jobs in Metropolitan America. And that study took a look at the 100 largest metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs, in the nation and ranked them according to what share of jobs within those communities were accessible within a 90-minute transit commute. And at the time, Tampa Bay ranked 93rd. And as the partnership began to get involved in issues of regional transportation and transit, we asked ourselves, why are we doing this? And the answer was, well, it's about getting people to jobs and having employers have access to labor force. And somebody asked the good question, well, how many people are we talking about with these projects we're discussing and advocating for? And There was an uncomfortable silence, and all the eyes in the room looked to the Director of Policy and Research to come up with some numbers. So we put together a team. We consulted with the author of that Brookings report. We worked with Tyndale Oliver, and we worked with the University of Minnesota Accessibility Observatory. And it's a little bit of a different project for the University of Minnesota because we modeled system-wide improvements to transit within the metropolitan area, as opposed to looking at a project by project. And we'll get into what those different system scenarios are. Instead of a 90-minute transit commute that was used in the Brookings report, we looked at a 60-minute transit commute, which we felt was a little bit more palatable. And again, we got the inputs for this study direct from the staff of the transit agencies within the metropolitan area. So VBus, PCPT, PSTA, HART, the Bull Runner, and TBARTA all contributed to our understanding. Those plans were converted into computer code called GTFS, which allowed the University of Minnesota to model the results. And what we're looking at in the maps and the tables that will follow is the change in job access from a baseline scenario. Each of the scenarios we present are additive. They build upon each other. And so with that, here are the scenarios and what they include. A, B, C, and D. Scenario A, which we call improved local bus service, takes the 10-year needs elements of the transit agency's transit development plan. Scenario B adds some county-based premium transit, the Sunrunner in St. Petersburg, the streetcar modernization, and as we heard about earlier, the Florida Avenue BRT. Scenario C layers the regional rapid transit onto the improved bus and the county-based premium transit. And then finally, and of interest to this board, is scenario D, which is really taking a look at that entire Envision 2030 regional TDP that I heard just won some awards. So with that, let's take a look at scenario A. And this is, again, the 10-year needs elements. What we found for the typical resident of the MSA, so that's everyone in Hernando, Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough County, they would get an additional access to 26,000 more jobs, which is a 29% job access increase. And you move from a baseline of 7.2% of jobs being available within the MSA to the typical worker to 9.2, and that's out of a base of 1.2 million jobs. And we asked our consultant to take a look at, and this was, as a result of the analysis of the TMA, the Transportation Management Area, the three-county, the primary cities in those counties. You see for each of the scenarios, the numeric job access change, the percentage increase in job access, and then the resulting share of all jobs in the MSA accessible to resident workers of those jurisdictions. Then when we move into scenario B, where we add in that local premium, you notice the map doesn't look a whole lot different. And that's primarily because the numbers don't change too much. Certainly for folks living in close access to those facilities, there is some benefit. We moved from 26,000 additional jobs to a little more than 27,000. And the job access increase and the percentage of all jobs accessible increased very incrementally. When we layer in the regional rapid transit, we see a much larger effect on job access than we do related to the local premium transit, where we move to 31,000 jobs. Again, that's from the baseline, 35.2% increase. And we move the needle quite a bit more in terms of the share of all jobs accessible. And some of this is based on the proximity of a resident worker to those stations on the RRT, but some of it is due to network effects and using the improved local transit to access the RRT and get to points within the region that were heretofore inaccessible. And then finally, that's scenario D, and we see a big change in the map and a big jump in terms of the number of jobs accessible up to 52,000 more jobs in the baseline, which is close to a 60% increase in job access for the typical worker. And then 11.3% of all jobs accessible. So getting close to, almost doubling, maybe more like 80% more jobs accessible than the baseline share of 7.2%. And we note that there's 116,000 workers within the region that would be able to access 150,000 more jobs than they would be in the baseline scenario. And so that's, sort of the difference when you take a look at the dark green areas versus the light green areas or the unshaded areas that see no change in job access. So we also took a look, the data we got back from the University of Minnesota is very rich and very granular, and we've already begun sharing some of that data with the local transit agencies, and we'd be happy to share that with TBARTA staff. But we started to play around with it and take a look at different geographies other than the cities and the counties. And we said, so we had a bunch of people that lost their jobs because of the pandemic. And there was some initial data that were released early on in the pandemic that were at the zip code level. And we were able to understand who is applying for reemployment assistance based on pandemic related dislocation. And those are the areas that are shaded green there. And we found within the region, 30% of our zip codes within the region had 5% or more of their workforce file for that reemployment assistance. And that is home to more than 400,000 workers. And in scenario D, we see that the typical residents of those areas would have access to an additional 76,000 jobs. And you recall the scenario D percentage change, or the numeric change, I'm sorry, in scenario D was 56,000. So certainly, the transit improvements would be of benefit to these sensitive populations in terms of their dislocation from employment. And then we also took a look from an equity perspective, those areas within the region that are high poverty and low access to vehicles. So these are areas where the poverty rate is more than 20%, or they have 20% of the households with no vehicle, or 75% or more of the households with only one vehicle. And we found that almost 30% of areas within the region meet those criteria, and those are home to just under 300,000 workers. And much like we saw with the COVID unemployment, the typical resident worker in these areas where there's high poverty and low vehicle access saw a significant change in the number of jobs accessible, 74,000, and again, region-wide, that was 56,000. So in summary, here's those scenarios again, and we see the baseline is up there up top. And so, of course, there's no change from the baseline. And we see that the 7.2% share of jobs accessible within the MSA. And we see, as we layer in these different scenarios, how those numbers move in the right direction. Of course, big jump by adding the local transit service. And these are, primarily the increase in frequencies, much more so than new routes per se. And again, going from scenario A to scenario B, a small movement in the needle region-wide, a larger jump going from B to C, and again, that is going from the local bus plus the county-based premium transit to adding in the regional premium transit. And then in sort of the very ambitious and visionary Envision 2030 scenario, it's a significant jump in those numbers. Going to present two charts here that show the numeric change based on the geography. We see very large numeric changes in our more urban communities, the cities of St. Petersburg and Tampa. Less so in our more suburban communities. And then when we take a look at the percentage change, some of those numbers and columns go in a different direction. There's a low numeric change in Pasco County, for example, but a very high percentage change in Pasco County. So it really has opened up a very large world and access to employment. One thing that you may know about the partnership is we collaborate with United Way Suncoast Community Foundation of Tampa Bay and the USF MUMA College of Business on our regional competitiveness report. We find year after year that both in terms of transit supply and demand, and those are sort of chicken and egg numbers, Tampa Bay ranks 20th out of 20. The University of Minnesota, their accessibility observatory, takes a look at job access. And so those rankings are listed here on the left-hand side under current state. So we have the current state of job access and the 19 other regional competitiveness report communities. If we were to add in the Envision 2030, that's scenario D, we see a pretty substantial jump going from the bottom third to the middle third. But of note, even with that very ambitious scenario, we are still far behind, many of the communities that are listed as our peer and competitive, regions across the United States. So just some takeaways before we open it up to questions. Just want to mention that job access is an additional goal and analysis tool for transit planning. We talk a lot about ridership, the potential to generate transit-oriented development as goals for transit. Job access is and should be a unit of analysis for both system-wide improvements as well as project improvements. Of course, our research found that local bus service along arterial roads provides the largest impact from that baseline for the typical Tampa Bay worker. But that regional rapid transit connecting three communities and being interlaced and interwoven with those local bus improvements has a larger impact on job access versus those three projects that are strictly serving a single county. The Envision 2030 scenario, very ambitious again, but it increases jobs accessible to the average Tampa Bay worker by nearly 58%, 58,000 additional jobs within that 60-minute commute. And that, if we were to implement the Envision 2030, Tampa Bay would jump from 15th to 9th in terms of job access, according to those University of Minnesota rankings. So I know that there's a lot of information that's been presented. I know you have had access to this presentation since Monday. So with that, Mr. Chair, I gladly entertain any questions that the board may have.
Thank you for that very enlightening report. Members, questions? Yes, Commissioner.
I just think it makes you want to root for D. But I also would say that we have a double whammy here in the Tampa Bay area, because not only do we have the lack of a regional transit option, we have low wages. And so having a better transit network certainly opens up the opportunity for a higher quality of life for a lot of our citizens who are at more financially disadvantaged. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Kevin.
Thanks. I just want to thank you for the presentation. To me, it again shows the emphasis on the huge improvement that can be had by having more frequent bus services local at the arterial route level. And we do have regional bus service now, and I have nothing against increasing it, but the vast majority of our benefits in this scenario is by frequency and by really making for that robust local service. And also, sometimes our definitions of regional and local, I'm not even sure that I'm not sure what they exactly measure. But at any rate, thank you. It was very enlightening.
Thank you for those comments. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay, any new business to come before the board?
I Or
Yes,
just a future item, just realizing that the TBARTA board has never been asked to or been presented with what we're doing parallel along Florida Avenue from downtown to Fowler Avenue and across to USF with the BRT that we have planned. In the future, I think it would be, I'd like to bring it forward, have someone from Hart bring that plan forward. It is also on a DOT road, Florida Avenue is, and so it can be shared and endorsed by TBARTA as a project.
I think that's a very excellent suggestion and would direct staff to work with you in making that happen. And I would like to see that too before there is a vote called on the, the option to this board wants to recommend as well. So happy to do that.
Thank
David, talk to Commissioner Kim about that. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that good suggestion. Nothing else? I'll accept a motion to adjourn then. We can adjourn.
Fine job, Mr. Chairman.